But what if there was a fifth mode? And I have a name for it, which is called the Hyperloop.
The Hyperloop?
Hyperloop, yeah.
In 2013, while riding high on the growing success of Tesla and SpaceX, entrepreneur Elon Musk released a white paper outlining the basic framework of the technology he called Hyperloop. The basic idea goes a little something like this. A tube reduces the air pressure to a near vacuum-like environment. A Hyperloop pod is then suspended in the tube, usually by magnetic levitation. The whole pod can then be propelled forward. Because there's no traditional friction sources like air resistance or rolling friction that would push back against the pod, the Hyperloop is able to move at incredibly high speeds and do so fairly efficiently. Despite its futuristic name, however, the general concept behind Hyperloop is actually pretty old. In fact, New York City's first attempt at an underground public transit system in the 1870s was based on a similar principle. The pneumatic transit system was short-lived, however, only stretching one block and topping out at a rather leisurely 10 miles per hour. While Elon would make some 21st century improvements to this concept and bestow a very 21st century name, he wouldn't end up pursuing the technology itself, instead electing to focus his efforts on something a little bit deeper, literally digging the requisite tunnels via his boring company. It would take another billionaire industrialist who dabbles in spaceflight. No, wait, not that one. Yeah, that's the one. After Richard Branson would make a large investment in the company Hyperloop One, it would be renamed to Virgin Hyperloop.
What we've always been trying to do as a company is show that this technology could work, that it could be made safe, and that ultimately it's something that's happening in the next couple of years, not the next 20 years.
Josh Geigel is the co-founder and CEO of Virgin Hyperloop. In a familiar tech startup story, he's seen the project go from a garage to a large-scale testing facility outside of Las Vegas.
So we started building the first kind of Hyperloop system in 2016. We've done a lot of work, about 500 tests that we've done on that over the last 5 years. And what we realized that we need to do is take that technology, show that it can be commercial, so drive the cost down, improve the efficiency, improve the performance. But the key thing is actually making it approachable and safe for individuals.
In order to do that, Josh, along with Virgin's head of passenger experience, Sarah Lucian, bravely volunteered to take the inaugural ride.
What her and I were realizing is we're the first two people sitting in a Hyperloop. The only type of people that have gone through this environment are in spacesuits, and there we are in just normal clothes because of the system, the safety of what we've designed.
3, 2, 1, launch.
And then once we started going, you felt a bit of acceleration. We accelerated a little bit harder than we would in commercial, be like a sports car. Yes. We got to about 108 miles an hour on that test. And it's a short run, it's about 500 yards or so, and came to a stop.
The test, lasting only about 20 seconds and covering only a quarter of a mile at just over 100 miles per hour, is a long way away from a true functioning Hyperloop. But as for optics, it's a crucial step for the future of funding.
The number one question we got from investors or from project proponents or just people in general was is a Hyperloop safe? And what better way to show something is safe than by actually getting people on it?
But convincing investors and governments that would likely be fronting some of the construction costs for an unproven technology is no easy task. First and foremost is the question of safety.
Most people don't know how an airplane works, but yet they get on an airplane. They get on an airplane because, it's faster than driving, and most importantly, they've probably gotten off of one before, they've seen someone get off of one before. And so what we set out to do was actually show that Hyperloop could be safe with two normal people, not astronauts, not adrenaline junkies or test pilots or anything like that. Two normal people getting on a Hyperloop, and then most importantly, those two people getting off.
But beyond safety concerns, constructing Hyperloops will undoubtedly require a significant capital investment to the estimated tune of around $60 million per kilometer of track. So a track from San Francisco to Los Angeles, for example, is likely to come with a price tag over $10 billion. And before large governments are willing to come in and front those costs, investors who are funding Hyperloop development must accept it as a long-term mixture of technology and infrastructure investing.
Investors that are used to short returns because you're developing apps or something to that effect, those aren't the investors that really get excited about Hyperloop. What you start to see is the people that are looking at platform technologies, right? So this idea that because the smartphone existed, Uber could exist, right? So who are like the Vanderbilts of this century? And that's the part where you're going to get a lot more no's than yeses. But those people that have the ability, the fortitude to stick it out, to see the game-changing platform here, those are the people that we're looking for. And since we've done that passenger test, there has been a lot of interest that's really, oh, this is a lot sooner than I thought.
Envisioning the ripple effects of what Hyperloop could achieve, though, is fairly challenging at this stage of development. It's fast, yes, but for point-to-point travel, traditional maglev trains can move pretty fast as well. And outside of China, South Korea, and Japan, even those haven't seen much adoption elsewhere due to the high costs and questionable profitability. The Shanghai line in China, for example, loses around $100 million every year. Hyperloop companies, however, believe they can offer something different than traditional railway lines.
My name's Alan James, and as far as I know, I'm the only guy on the planet who's written a government-level business case for 300 kmh conventional high-speed rail, 500 kmh maglev, and 1,000 kmh Hyperloop. It's fundamentally about moving people from where they are to where they want to go, when they want to make those journeys, and doing it in much smaller numbers. So pod designs for Hyperloop range from 12 to 28 seats, typically. Why are they small? It's because small enables the network to operate flexibly. And a great example of that is the east-west strategic route across the north of England, from Liverpool to Manchester to Leeds. So to get from Liverpool via Manchester to Leeds by train is just short of 2 hours today. It'll probably take you 2 hours driving as well in average traffic conditions. Net result is those three city regions remain three separate entities: Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds. There's very little commuting traffic between those urban areas. Hyperloop absolutely changes that from the ground up. Liverpool to Manchester is a 5 or 6 minute journey. Manchester to Leeds is also a 5 or 6 minute journey. What that effectively does is create a single supercity economy.
In this vision, the Hyperloop acts a little more like a highway, where pods have fixed destinations and don't need to stop along the way. Meaning you can travel on a Hyperloop network from, say, Liverpool to Leeds, while the pod behind you travels from Liverpool to Manchester. And if that metro Hyperloop network is connected to other networks from the same location, you could travel from Liverpool to Paris or Liverpool to Amsterdam, all without making a single stop.
For passengers, for business, for leisure, that is utterly transformational. For high-value freight and logistics, it's equally transformational. But critically, if you do a Hyperloop network at scale, you begin to deliver massively significant carbon savings too.
A multi-regional Hyperloop network could become a replacement for both short-haul passenger and cargo flights and traditional ground transportation, both of which are significant carbon producers.
One Hyperloop-connected distribution hub, perhaps at an airport that is predominantly used for international air freight, replacing maybe 10, 12, 15 distributed road hubs. It takes a lot of polluting and inefficient truck haulage off the roads. That itself means roads gain extra capacity.
Hyperloops will still need to use electricity to both move pods and maintain the near vacuum environment in the tube. Proponents of the technology believe that this can be done by using renewable sources, including a combination of solar panels and battery technology that could be used along the Hyperloop itself. But even with all multipliers of time and carbon emission savings that a Hyperloop network may provide, the investment capital required to actually build such a network becomes even more economically and politically daunting.
Committing doesn't mean spending billions on day one. Committing means, how do we phase it?
One company in the Netherlands is working to develop that technology, and perhaps more importantly, the international coalition needed to make the Hyperloop network a reality.
So we are here in Europe's first full-scale Hyperloop test facility, where we can already prove every conceptual technology of the Hyperloop.
This is Tim Houter, a co-founder and CEO of Hart Hyperloop, headquartered in the city of Delft. And while this testing tube might not seem as large as others, inside is a key technology to create the on- and off-ramp type infrastructure of a Hyperloop network. That is, a lane switch.
That's something we can already test here. You can actually see it here, that the track is diverging from one track into two. That makes it possible to eventually split up the Hyperloop track in two sections. And in that sense, you can create a complete Hyperloop network. That in the end will make it possible to travel, for example, over a whole continent. Take Europe, for example, with the same ease as you can now travel with a metro in a city.
The nice thing about this magnetic levitation system that we've developed is that there's absolutely zero moving components in the track. So for example, if you have to do a lane switch, all you do is that the tube basically splits up, and statically the tracks also split up. And whenever the vehicle enters a switch, it either pulls itself to the right with its magnets, or it pulls itself to the left with its magnets.
Lane switching on traditional rail requires the physical movement of the rail. Even modern magnetic levitation tracks use lane switching techniques in order to transfer trains from one track to another.
And this is a very crucial element, because this is the thing that limits the capacity and, in the end, the usefulness of the rail network. Because the moment that a track is switching, that means that at that moment you are creating an unsafe environment for the trains behind it. So you need a lot of space between trains. In a Hyperloop, because you have no moving components in the track, all the vehicles can be much closer to each other. You can achieve a very high frequency and basically have your vehicles moving and merging in and out of the network very much like a highway.
For now, though, Hart's physical testing has been limited by the size of their tube. Because the test track is only 30 meters long, they haven't tested this lane switch at speeds greater than 20 kilometers per hour. However, the company is working to build a new test site where it plans to increase that testing speed to 300 kilometers per hour.
We're now in a phase where we have proven most of the most important technologies in the test facilities that we already have. And we have also demonstrated the viability and the feasibility of a network. If you look at all the subsystems that it consists of, most of those are proven systems, already demonstrated in lab conditions. So we don't really believe that the technology itself is going to be the biggest challenge.
Because for all Hyperloop companies out there, actually building a Hyperloop system requires more than just a good product.
We're talking about the safety aspects, we're talking about integration into the environment, we're talking about the social aspects. Do people feel comfortable traveling in such a system? So it's about all these different aspects, and the complexity is really getting all the different stakeholders that are relevant and that do need to contribute to bring this to market, to get them all following the same roadmap.
In order to help build this coalition of private and public interest in Hyperloop development, Hart in 2018 partnered with other Hyperloop companies from Europe and Canada. The goal was to define, establish, and standardize the framework to regulate Hyperloop systems.
Right now we are working with all the Hyperloop developers together in setting up the first, let's say, structure for starting the standards drafting.
One of the most important goals for Hart is interoperability, which is essentially making sure that different systems can communicate with each other.
Interoperability is so important because what we want to achieve is actually have this seamless travel experience. So you don't want to end up, for example, going from Madrid to Paris and then switching because you need to use a different technology to get, for example, to Amsterdam.
The idea being that as companies around Europe create the first commercial Hyperloop tracks between individual cities, one day those can all be connected to a larger network.
Everyone that believes that Hyperloop is a future transport system also realizes that there is a need to have this network because that's where Hyperloop thrives.
Hyperloop is such a huge project. It's definitely not something that you can do on your own or as a single company. So you need to do it with a lot of other companies. You need to have the governments. And I think in that sense, the biggest challenge that we've encountered is to really get all the required parties together to take the steps in development and in commercial implementation.
Hart's next plan is to build the European Hyperloop Center, an open testing facility which will include a 2.6-kilometer test track. And the company hopes to test travel speeds there at up to 700 kilometers per hour. Virgin Hyperloop is also racing to construct the first commercial Hyperloop route, with projects in various states of development in India, Saudi Arabia, and the United States. Recently, the company announced plans to build a Hyperloop certification center in West Virginia, which will include a 6-mile-long test track. Proving the technology here will be crucial if Hyperloop networks can find a home among infrastructure investments that the Biden administration hopes to make.
The idea that there's multiple Hyperloop companies, I think, is a redeeming aspect in the business. People really want to see something happen, so having multiple people move forward is good for that.
I was struck when Josh and Sarah rode the pod. 2 or 3 of the major outlets used the phrase, "We now have a new mode of transport." And although all of that technology had existed before those 2 human beings rode it, it was the moment at which those 2 human beings traveled that short distance down the tube that in popular imagination, Hyperloop became a mode of transport.
The metaphor I use with my team is that, the Wright brothers were first, but none of us fly on Wright brothers airlines anymore. If you don't continue to innovate, you're not going to be around, and so we'll continue to be at the forefront of building Hyperloop.
Back in 2013, Elon had an idea. I think the difference now in 2021 is some brilliant engineers have spent real time grinding out the details. And I thoroughly expect the next 3 to 5 years to be decisive.
week, how hydrogen can transform our energy usage. We'll look at why the universe's most abundant element could be a game changer in the climate revolution.
Hydrogen technologies are not new. They are used in other sectors. We use them in space, on our rockets, and we don't need the laws of physics to change to be able to use hydrogen on our planes.
From iron ore to green hydrogen, one of Australia's richest men tells us about his pivot to sustainable energy.
Let's take action. It's practical, it's implementable. Let's do it now.
Plus, the hydrogen revolution. We'll speak with the CEO of Italian utilities firm Snam about his new book and how green hydrogen could be competitive within 5 years.
Costs are coming down and people are waking up to the fact that it's the only way to decarbonize certain sectors.
From Bloomberg's global headquarters in New York, I'm Kaylee Lines, and this is Bloomberg Green. It's a new year, so here at Bloomberg Green, we're highlighting new solutions in the fight against climate change. And one of those is as old as the universe itself, hydrogen. It's the simplest element around, but could well be a game changer when it comes to turning around our dependence on fossil fuels. Today, hydrogen is used in the chemicals industry to produce petroleum products. It's also starting to be used in steel production, an industry under a lot of pressure to decarbonize. But it has far more uses as well, from powering cars to heating our homes. And Bloomberg New Energy Finance sees a seismic shift in the sector in the next 10 years as green hydrogen squeezes out dirtier alternatives. So-called gray hydrogen dominates today. But as renewable electricity gets cheaper and more accessible, so will green hydrogen. In this week's edition of Bloomberg Green, we'll explore what this push into hydrogen means for tackling climate change. We'll hear from Australian billionaire Twiggy Forrest about his pivot from iron ore to hydrogen, and we'll also speak with the CEO of Italian utility company Snam about his book, The Hydrogen Revolution. But first, what are we using hydrogen for? And why does it actually matter? Christine Lee Edwards explains.
Hydrogen, the most plentiful element in the universe. On Earth, we find it mostly bonded to oxygen in the form of water, or in other gases known as hydrocarbons. Hydrogen gas, H2, burns hot and clean, making it an attractive tool in the race to net zero. But isolating hydrogen from other elements is no easy task. Today, the cheapest way to do this is via chemical processes that break up natural gas. This releases a lot of carbon dioxide. Another method is to use electricity to split water molecules in a process called electrolysis. Although there is no carbon byproduct, a lot of electricity is needed. And if this power comes from burning coal or gas, it negates the zero emissions goals of using hydrogen to begin with. Hydrogen produced in this way, powered by fossil fuels, is called gray hydrogen. If carbon capture and storage is used together with fossil fuels, then it becomes blue hydrogen. If nuclear power is used, it's called pink. And finally, green hydrogen is when it's produced via electrolysis and powered from renewable sources. This method is considered emissions-free. It's predicted that by the early 2030s, H2 made from renewables will be cheaper than that made from fossil fuels. But that hinges on the cost of electrolysis declining, which will be achieved through larger projects and an expansion of manufacturing. To be clear, vast amounts of H2 are already used today. Global production in 2018 totaled 117 million metric tons. This hydrogen is mostly used for its chemical properties, not as a source of energy, and very little of it is clean. Some sectors like steel could start using hydrogen for these chemical properties, replacing coal. Industries like cement and glass may also use hydrogen as a source of heat. Another advantage is its energy storage potential. It can be stored over long periods of time and used when more power needs to be added to the grid. It also could hold an advantage over batteries in heavy transport and shipping. The promise of hydrogen for energy has been around since at least 1874, when Jules Verne wrote about it in his book, The Mysterious Island. But the future of hydrogen will depend on policy. Countries with net zero targets, carbon pricing, and hydrogen strategies with investment mechanisms are likely to see the highest H2 demand.
That was Bloomberg's Christine Lee Edwards explaining what hydrogen means for the energy transition. But how are businesses approaching the sector? Well, one of Australia's richest men is making a big play into hydrogen. Andrew Forrest, better known as Twiggy, made his fortune from iron ore, being the chairman, former CEO, and major shareholder in Fortescue Metals, one of the world's biggest miners. But after having made over $10 billion in profit from the metal in the last fiscal year, Twiggy wants to transform Fortescue into a clean energy company. He's been scouring the planet in search of investment opportunities in hydrogen and renewables. The firm plans to allocate up to 10% of its annual profits for green energy investments and is exploring projects across the globe, from Indonesia to Argentina. Francine Lacqua caught up with Twiggy Forrest.
There's only one type of clean hydrogen, all the rest is dirty.
Yeah.
That is green. If you just say green hydrogen is clean, the rest is dirty, then you've actually nailed it. And, you know, anyone else who produces any other rubbish, any other argument, just look them in the eye and say, why is global warming accelerating if anything you're saying is true? And then you'll know, actually, it's greenwashing.
Yeah, but there's a lot of greenwashing because I keep on being told it's a transition. We can't just, make the transition at a click of a finger. So what are we doing wrong? What can we do better?
I don't remember the personal computer having to transition the typewriter. I really don't remember that. I don't remember the smartphone having to transition the pocket calculator and the old landline. You know, its transition line is complete rubbish. The lie got put to it 2 days ago when JCB, a really loved British company, every right for the country to be proud of JCB, and Fortescue, holding a bit of a similar reputation, fantastic track record, everyone's been super well from Fortescue, huge balance sheet, super strong. When those two companies got together and agreed a $7 to $9 billion US agreement per annum, right, then that's a real wake-up call to say, hang on, green hydrogen is obviously commercial now. You know, every other form of fossil fuel hydrogen, you know, it can compete with it on price, it can probably lose on price, but what we know, it is cooking the planet. And only green hydrogen, zero methane, zero carbon in the supply chain. Don't worry about the molecules in the supply chain.
But at the moment, we're not even phasing out coal, if you look at the G20 communique. So we have a long way to go to talk about only using green hydrogen.
Yeah, so look, I have a call, which I'd like to make now, that the world should not fund any more coal-fired power stations, coal mining projects, ever. We should wind them down as quickly as possible because they are cooking the planet just like grey and blue hydrogen is cooking the planet.
Yeah.
You know, hydrogen, which is not made from renewable electricity, is releasing 10 to 16 times more carbon, let alone the methane, which is worse, than it is hydrogen. So we've just got to stop doing things which are self-harming under the guise of greenwashing.
So why are leaders so slow? Even if you look at the appetite for ESG investments, they're growing exponentially, so are emissions. So where are we allocating capital?
Okay, so take the recent G20. There's probably a reason why there wasn't strong action coming out of the G20 because people were not aware that major transactions between large companies were taking place now on green hydrogen, that actually this pollution-free all the way through the supply chain fuel was now being transacted at multi-billion-dollar scale. If they'd known that, I don't believe any sovereign leader or any energy minister or climate change minister could not take ultra seriously that green hydrogen is now here to stay. It's broken through. History has been made. It will never go back.
Okay, what is the one thing that you would tell leaders today and business leaders? How do we transition faster than what we are now because we're at real risk of missing our targets?
Oh, so that's really simple. You stop funding, you stop subsidizing, you stop using money into fossil fuels. It could be carbon sequestration, it could be fuel rebates, it could be anything. Hundreds of billions of dollars getting ashed while we ash the planet on fossil fuel subsidies. Because we haven't had that renewable electricity, we haven't had that green hydrogen, it's kind of been pushed down. It's all sorts of excuses. Oh, it'll never be commercial. It'll never be supplied in the quantities we need it. You know, blah, blah, blah. Now we know, let's take action. It's practical. It's implementable. Let's do it now.
okay, if we do it now, is there going to be a shock to the energy system? Is there going to be a shock actually to economically? And is it worth, not talking about transition, just going from A to B?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. A to B is the solution. Let fossil fuels do what fossil fuels do. Just burn their coal, burn their oil, burn the gas. At least they're pumping up carbon and methane into the atmosphere, honestly. Well, not that honest, because they don't measure methane, which is 90 times worse than carbon. But at least the carbon is being done honestly. Encourage the green hydrogen sector to come in really fast. Okay, it's there. There's renewable power all over the world. We now know how to make electrolyzers much cheaper, like 25% of the original cost. We know how to do that now. We don't have an excuse to get into it.
Does it need to be cheaper than oil and fossil fuel for it to be viable worldwide?
Well, right now it is. Okay, so let's just swallow that bit of financial data. Right now it is cheaper, and it's getting more cheap. It's the only fuel you know of which is declining in value.
You don't have enough of it, right, to power the world.
Yes. That's only because we haven't had policies to support it. If we had policies to support it 5-10 years ago, it would be everywhere. You'd see the global warming budget start to come down.
Yeah.
Now, we've got 5 or 10 years to make a huge difference. I need policy leaders all over the world to appreciate now, okay, big business is transacting with green hydrogen in multi-billion-dollar agreements. Right. We now know it's here and it's here to stay. Let's spread it everywhere.
Coming up on the program, the hydrogen revolution. We'll speak with the CEO of Italian utility firm Snam about his new book and why he thinks green hydrogen will be competitive in just 5 years. Plus, how are airlines working to become more sustainable? We'll look at how Airbus plans to step up in the climate fight. This is Bloomberg Green. From Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York, I'm Kaylee Lines, and this is Bloomberg Green. What will the world look like in 2050? Will global temperatures have stabilized, electric vehicles be abundant, and solar and wind power homes around the world? According to Marco Alvera, the CEO of Italian energy company Snam, that vision of the future could be a reality. And he says that hydrogen will pave its way. As he tells it in his new book, The Hydrogen Revolution, Alvera's moment of reckoning came in November 2018 when he tasked the Snam Scenarios team with studying how Europe could reduce its CO2 emissions to zero by 2050. Looking through the results of the study, Alvera said he was struck by how much hydrogen was in Europe's energy mix by that year. Beyond the abundance of hydrogen, the SNAM model also predicted that it would be the cheapest form of decarbonized energy for many sectors, and that it could be cheaper than today's prices for oil, coal, and nuclear power. Our Maria Tadeo spoke with Alvera at COP26.
It's happening all very fast. We see the cost of hydrogen coming down a lot. Hydrogen will play a big role in the energy mix. I don't know if it's going to be 15 or 25% of a fully decarbonized energy system, but it's going to be big. Costs are coming down, and people are waking up to the fact that it's the only way to decarbonize certain sectors, the so-called hard-to-abate sectors.
And you say it's the only way and the costs are coming down. Where do you see prices moving? Because a lot of the reticence at times has to do with the pricing, that some argue, well, it's still not the cheapest option on the market.
So when I was first working in hydrogen in 2004, it was costing $1,000 per megawatt hour. 2010, $600. Today, $100, and we see it going down to $50 in 5 years' time, and to going down to $25 per megawatt hour in the next 10 years or so, which is a quarter of where it is today. That's really because renewable energy, and we're talking green hydrogen here, renewable energy costs are falling, but the cost of making the electrolyzer, which is the kit that you use to convert solar or wind energy and water into hydrogen, the cost of this kit is falling a lot because it doesn't really exist on an industrial scale. So as we build up capacity, we industrialize it, we standardize it, and we squeeze costs out. That's really the cost trajectory.
And for that, of course, you need demand, however, for governments and also institutions to kind of buy into this idea that it is the future and we want to invest and create the infrastructure. What are they telling you? When you speak to governments, when you speak to officials, are they keen on this?
They're very keen. So the Department of Energy shares our view in the States of getting to below $1 a kilo, which is $25 a megawatt hour. The European Union has a hydrogen strategy, which is very clear, and several member states have the same. Chile wants to export a lot of hydrogen. China's big on hydrogen. Australia is very big on hydrogen. Japan is blending already hydrogen. So I would say the world is now really focused on this because it's the only way to store energy for a long period of time economically is to convert it into either a liquid or a gas.
And of course, you talk about the price, but the other big component is the volume. You know, how big can you go? Where do you see that on a time scale?
So wherever it's sunny or windy, you can produce very cheap hydrogen eventually. And so compared to oil and gas, which are concentrated in a few parts of the world, it's going to be very democratic from that point of view. So every sunny place, every desert, every ocean wind can be turned into hydrogen that we can put on ships, in pipes, and really start trading it around the world. So it's going to happen a lot faster than a lot of people think.
So, and when you say a lot faster, what is that in time?
As I said, $50, which is essentially oil parity within 5 years. And then, depending on how quickly we ramp it up after that, we could get to $25, which is coal parity before the end of the decade.
And in big scale.
In big scale, because once you get to coal parity, that's the only way we're going to get China and India to stop burning new coal. We have businesses in China and in India, and I see a lot of hydrogen development, a lot of renewable development in both countries. The India announcement was incredibly strong on 2030. Some people were upset about the 2017 net zero deadline, but when it comes to 30, he announced a big commitment to get to 50% renewables.
Were you surprised by it?
I was surprised that they would make it so explicit, and even the net zero is a big thing for them. And so I think it will happen faster than 2070 because of the falling cost of renewable and hydrogen. India's burning 80 gigawatt of oil, of diesel, to keep the lights on. So there's an immediate opportunity there, and we're very interested in working in that country.
And with regards to China, perhaps the fact that we haven't really seen them active, I guess the diplomats are working on this, but we haven't really seen the leadership.
It's going to be technology, it's going to be industry. I think China has committed to a net zero, which is very important. At the G20, China was clearly behind the 1.5 degrees. So I think a lot has been achieved between the G20 and COP, and I think what's really important is to see in the coming years how quick it's in our hands to make part of this happen in 5 years, or it could otherwise happen in 15, 20 years. It's about building the project. The capital is there. We saw how many trillions of dollars are already committed. What's missing is really the projects, and that's where companies like us step in.
Marco Alvera, CEO of SNAM there, speaking with our Maria Tadeo. Let's turn now to the aviation industry. It's a big contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions, and it's under pressure to change that. In October, the International Air Transport Association, a trade body representing airlines, approved a target of achieving net zero emissions by 2050. To achieve that, many airlines in the US and Europe are looking to buy sustainable aviation fuel made from renewable sources like used vegetable oil. Initiatives like these are pushing plane makers to come up with some radical new aircraft that will eventually cater to our growing appetite for travel without hurting the environment. We took a look at how Airbus, the world's #2 aircraft manufacturer, is stepping up to the challenge.
How long until we can fly emission-free? Airbus says it's more confident by the day it can be done by its 2035 target. Airbus's CEO spoke about its ambitions for hydrogen-powered planes at the company's summit in France.
The physics works. Hydrogen technologies are not new. They are used in other sectors. We use them in space on our rockets, and we don't need the laws of physics to change to be able to use hydrogen on our planes. So every day we become more confident, but we think we need to have a plane, we need to have the right fuels, the hydrogen available in the right quantity at the right place at the right time, and we need the regulations to be ready. So we really need the work and the collaboration of many people around the globe to make it happen on time.
But it could be a long wait until green passenger jets go mainstream. Larger aircraft with more than 150 seats are not expected to feature globally until about 2050. That means manufacturers and airlines today are under growing pressure to ramp up short-term innovations to cut their carbon. In the long term, meeting the ambitious plans for so-called green hydrogen means building a giant industry almost from scratch. To make that happen, British airline EasyJet is among those saying governments need to get involved and fast. Aviation's emissions over the last 3 decades leading up to the pandemic grew by about 80% to over 1 gigaton, and that's projected to double by 2050. According to Bloomberg NEF, about half of the airlines with the largest global market share have set net zero targets by that same date, nearly 3 decades away.
Coming up, from blue sky projects to the bottom line. We'll speak with our Bloomberg NEF expert Meredith Annex and dig into their models about how hydrogen fits into the future energy mix. This is Bloomberg Green. From Bloomberg's world headquarters in New York, I'm Kaylee Lyons, and this is Bloomberg Green. Now let's bring in Meredith Annex, our Bloomberg NEF hydrogen specialist, to talk more about how hydrogen could change the energy landscape. So Meredith, what place do you think hydrogen is likely to have in the future energy mix globally?
Hydrogen's this incredible solution for us as we look to decarbonize because it's a perfect solution in areas that are hard to electrify. So where we like to think about hydrogen playing a role, it's in things like heavy industry, especially where you need a feedstock as well as energy source. and in things like dispatchable power, long-haul transport, maybe even shipping and aviation.
That sounds great that it can be used for such diverse industries. At the end of the day, though, how much is this going to cost?
Well, that's the amazing thing about hydrogen, because depending on how you make it, it can actually see significant cost declines in the future. So when we're talking about clean hydrogen, we usually mean green hydrogen produced from renewable electricity. And in that case, your hydrogen is almost as cheap as the renewables that are used to make it. So if you're in a place with really good renewable resources, you'll be able to have cheaper hydrogen. But even in places with less good resources, we think that hydrogen can be cheaper than $1 per kilogram, which is the price of unabated hydrogen today, and around $8 per million BTUs for those who prefer to think in energy units. And that can be achieved anywhere in the world by 2050, we believe.
All right, so let's talk about kind of the pros and cons list. I don't know where cost fits into that, but what are the advantages to hydrogen over other renewables, and then what are the drawbacks?
Yeah, main advantage is the fact that hydrogen can serve roles that electrons struggle with. And that's things like seasonal storage, for instance, or just anything where you need storability, where electrons are harder to store, hydrogen is going to be easier. That also leads to a downside, though, because hydrogen is less energy dense than the usual things that we use for storable energy today, like coal or oil or natural gas. So you will need more volume of storage to handle the same amount of energy.
Let's talk about the viability as well and how it may differ in different geographies. What is your view on that?
Yeah. So for green hydrogen, again, from renewable electricity, really places with the best renewable resources, things like Latin America or the Middle East, even Southern Europe, have really, really good potential for producing hydrogen. And then when you're looking at blue hydrogen, which is produced from natural gas or coal with carbon capture and storage, we do see that becoming more expensive than green hydrogen in the future, especially as renewable electricity costs come down. But that can be a viable option in places like the US Gulf Coast or Russia, where you've got good geological storage for the carbon, as well as ample natural gas that's quite cheap.
All right, great breakdown. Thank you so much to our Meredith Annex, our Bloomberg NEF hydrogen specialist. And of course, you can get more from the Bloomberg NEF team on the terminal and online. And they've recently done a podcast called Hydrogen 101 as part of its Switched On series. So from iron ore titans pivoting to cleaner energy to talk of a hydrogen revolution, that's it from this week's edition of Bloomberg Green. We'll be back next week with a deep dive into the state of electric vehicles. And you can keep the conversation going by following us on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter @Climate. I'm Kaylee Lyons from Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York, and this is Bloomberg Green.
The great sci-fi art of the mid-20th century teased a vision of the future with one distinct element in common: a life for humans in outer space. Whether vacationing on an exotic new planet or commuting to the moon for business, space travel seemed like it was just around the corner. Yet here we are, a half-century later, and only about 500 human beings have ever left the bounds of Earth's atmosphere. But thanks to a set of ambitious private companies betting on the promise of space tourism, that long-awaited future could be here sooner than we think. For most of the history of spaceflight, governments have been the prime force behind nearly every aspect, from planning to funding to crew selection. But as early as the 1980s, proposals for commercial space tourism began to emerge, along with innovative solutions for getting people there, such as the wild concept of sticking a 74-person passenger cabin in the cargo bay of a NASA space shuttle. Although various non-astronauts have been selected for missions over the years, true space tourism didn't happen until 2001, when an entrepreneur named Dennis Tito coughed up an estimated $20 million to hitch a ride with the Russian Federal Space Agency for a week-long vacation aboard the International Space Station. 20 years later, we're seeing a new contender in this final frontier of tourism: private companies.
It's becoming a private enterprise situation, still very high risk with a high reward, potential reward. But, government is really out of the business of flying people now, and it's really going to be companies like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson that do that heavy lifting. Commercial space tourism is usually about taking the non-astronaut, the private citizen, into an orbital or suborbital flight. So you get a short amount of microgravity experience, and you can float and take some photos. And then you come back. This was something that technology had gotten to a point where the private sector was going to make a business out of this. There are multiple companies that want to get to the place where they fly people into space.
The first of these is Blue Origin, founded in 2000 by Jeff Bezos. Using the autonomous rocket system New Shepard, a tribute to the first American in space, Blue Origin plans to launch up to 6 passengers at a time, offering a rarefied treat of 62-mile-high views and a momentary experience of weightlessness. Booking officially kicked off in May 2021, with the very first seat to be auctioned off for charity. Meanwhile, Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic has also been pursuing a viable form of suborbital tourism, aiming for a launch in 2022 once Sir Richard himself has taken a flight.
I'm hoping to be able to go to space. I'd love to be able to coincide it with the moon landing and go to space. So I've got the whip on the team, and we'll see how we go.
The company claims to have lined up over 600 seat reservations so far, including Justin Bieber and Leonardo DiCaprio. Virgin has projected that the final cost of the ticket will be at least $250,000, or roughly $50,000 for each of the 5 minutes or so of weightlessness that you'll get to experience. Although costly, both companies' offerings aim to make suborbital flight a regular form of adventure travel, eventually driving down costs at scale to expand the customer base beyond the orbit of celebrities and billionaires. The third major contender is Elon Musk's SpaceX, which has set its sights even higher on orbital flights, which are
a whole nother level of complexity and energy and danger. When you go suborbital, if you're just going to go up above the von Karman line, which is 100 kilometers or about 62 miles, you only need to get up to maybe 5,000 miles an hour to get up there, and you go basically straight up and then straight back down. You don't have the reentry heating that you would see coming in from an orbital. So when you go orbital, I don't care if you're a baseball or a battleship, you've got to go 17,500 miles per hour, not just 5,000 miles an hour. The energies involved are much greater. By doing that, SpaceX has gone another level up, and that's what they're doing with the Inspiration 4.
Visit inspiration4.com for your chance to go to space.
Inspiration 4 is the first planned all-civilian mission into orbit, slated to launch in late 2021. The crew will bring their own set of diverse perspectives and backgrounds and experiences to test how a group of different people, namely people who aren't professional astronauts, could fare in space.
Until now, astronauts have had to be physically perfect, and this mission is changing that. And so I feel incredibly honored to be representing those who aren't physically perfect. At age 10, I was diagnosed with bone cancer, and I was treated at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And I spent a year there undergoing intense chemo and also surgery that ultimately saved my leg. I now work at St. Jude as a PA, a physician assistant, and I work with leukemia and lymphoma patients. The kids we work with are so brave, and they are very excited to watch me go to space because this is showing them that, you know, they're capable of doing this as well.
Haley, along with 3 other crew members, will spend 3 days in space, orbiting the Earth every 90 minutes before landing back off the coast of Florida.
Well, when you think about access, the first astronauts for the United States came from the test pilot side. And so women weren't allowed to be a part of that. We have somebody in their 20s, somebody in their 30s, somebody in their 40s, and somebody in their 50s. And so there can be access in all kinds of ways, whether you're talking about age, whether you're talking about gender, whether you're talking about race and ethnicity, and all of those things.
The first time, you know, people are going up into space and not sent there by a superpower like the United States or Russia or China, well, that's like really significant. And, you know, you've got to, you know, be very thoughtful about it. The whole game plan right now is to make space like really affordable and, you know, accessible for everybody so that you can have fishing buddies going to space someday. But the first is special. And so with that, we wanted to have, you know, a crew selection process that could make space available to everyday people.
Getting to space is only the first step for space tourism. The next challenge is what to do and where to stay when you get there. Axiom Space is planning to launch the first segment of a new commercial space station in 2024. Their $2 billion project, called Ax Station, will become the first free-flying private international space station. Or, to use a more consumer-friendly term, a space hotel. Axiom isn't the only company out to make your space stay a little more comfortable. Bigelow Aerospace has been building what they call expandable habitat technology, like their B330, an inflatable pod module that expands once in orbit.
There's even one attached to the International Space Station right now they've been testing. And you take it up and it's rather small, and then you inflate it, and it seems to be working very, very well. This is likely to be the first kind of tourist hotel that you're going to see up in space. First of all, it's easier to carry instead of this giant tin can with all of that. The inflatables are lighter. You can just blow them up, and they get a nice big size for about, you know, less than half the weight probably.
But even as space missions become accessible to civilians,
the risks of going into space are incredibly high. And you could die 1,000 ways that we can think of and 1,000 other ways that we can't think of.
This is Michelle Hanlon. She's a space lawyer at the Mississippi School of Law, focused on protecting humans in outer space.
Now, I'm not an attorney for any of the space tourists, so I haven't been privy to their private contracts. But I can tell you that the FAA requires certain waivers to be in those contracts. So, for example, the FAA says, well, we're not going to make you make your spacecraft to a certain safety level. We are going to make you, spacecraft operator, make sure that you inform your space tourists of all of the hazards that you know of. I imagine a very long waiver, all the ways you can die in space. And you have to understand that there's health risks, and you have to indemnify the US government if you are launching from the United States. So those are things that we know a space tourist has to sign and has to waive. So now let's go back and think about our space flight participants. The FAA calls space tourists space flight participants. They don't call them astronauts. Why is that important? If you're not an astronaut, there's no obligation to rescue you if something goes wrong. It's a lot of money to set up a rescue launch. If it can even be done, it's something really important to think about, and that difference as we cross this threshold from having astronauts in space to having real people like me in space.
And when we are able to make it to space reliably enough, there's still a host of other legal and ethical issues to consider before space tourism can truly take off.
There are so many gaps in space law that we are going to have to put in a lot of sort of basement ideas. And so, for example, the Outer Space Treaty is a treaty that offers principles and guidelines for state activities, for the activities of national governments. It doesn't talk about private entities. It doesn't talk about humans in space. So now if something goes wrong, so let's think about all the times hotels on Earth are sued, right? So slip and falls. You step on something in the bathroom, you sue the hotel, and it becomes a private lawsuit. because of the vagaries of international law, if something happens in space, well, boy, you can sue the state that launched your spacecraft, you can sue the company that brought you there, you can sue the hotel, you can sue the individual, you can sue every government related to that, because the way the Outer Space Treaty and the Outer Space Regime have set this up is that anything that happens in space first has to go through a diplomatic channel before you think about suing in a court of law. And so every single slip and fall in a space hotel is a diplomatic nightmare. And so we really need to figure that out before we start sending a lot of people there. You think about human rights in space. Here, we don't think about a human right to oxygen because it's kind of all around us and free. It's not in a space hotel. So what happens if something happens and the oxygen depletes? Who gets the oxygen first? And then, of course, let's not even think about the labor. How do you treat your labor in a space hotel where that person may be there for 2 or 3 years without coming back to Earth? So a lot of things to think about.
Space habitats are more likely in the near future to focus on research missions and be a home for experiments that can't happen as easily back on Earth.
Space hotels, I think they garner a lot of headlines and a lot of news, but at the same time, that's not the first thing that you're going to see happen. They don't offer the compelling business case, I think, that you'll see from a place that wants to manufacture pharmaceuticals or a new type of crystal or some type of filament or fiber optic cables and other things that you can do in microgravity. The things that are actually, a high value finished good, when you get that back to Earth and you sell it for a very, very huge profit margin, that's what's likely to happen in space, as opposed to having a real estate platform that you sell to a tourist. A space hotel is really interesting, and it will probably happen, but it's not likely to be at the forefront of space commerce.
Even if space hotels are right around the corner, don't get too excited about booking a trip in one.
It's not a cheap ticket to ride to space, and it's going to be, millionaires and billionaires and that sort. But at the same time, the point was made that in the early days of airline trips, that was also a completely unaffordable ticket for most people. Those people who flew were people of means, and over time it becomes affordable to the masses. And I think that's the goal for all the entrepreneurs in space as well, to get those costs down to a point where it's not $10 million or $5 million or $300,000 ride into suborbital space. When it becomes more like buying a first-class ticket to go to Europe from the United States. So that's the goal, and the question is, can we get to that point?
Given the immense operating costs of getting to space, it may be years, if ever, until space tourism becomes a profitable venture for any of these companies. Virgin Galactic, the only publicly traded company of the three, has had a particularly rocky year, initially riding on the momentum of a SPAC deal, but more recently beset by launch delays and major funders, including Branson himself, selling large quantities of their stock in the company.
Space is really, really, really hard, and it's an absolute cliche, but it's one that happens to be very true. It's just really hard to do. That's also the reason that you've seen the delays that, Virgin had talked about flying years and years ago. And it became such a crazy point that Richard Branson actually stopped talking about it when he was asked, because it was never going to be when he predicted. But it's not insurmountable. And, investors have stepped up because this is something that is doable.
Despite the astronomical dangers and costs of getting to space, it may ultimately follow the course of other once fanciful modes of travel.
Wright brothers having, what was by modern standards a very unimpressive first flight, at Kitty Hawk. I mean, you had less than 20 years later, you had your first airborne ambulances being used to save lives. Fundamentally, the world is a more interesting place when people can go and dance among the stars and such.
The lure of space is innate. It's in our DNA. It's that exploration bug. We are an exploratory species, and we want to go out there and see what's out there.
That vision that I had in 1969 of seeing normal human beings travel into space, it's finally beginning to happen. When you get a bunch of people up there and they can all see it for themselves, that'll create even yet another revolution in how we treat our planet and the way we think about it.
So while 2001 came and went without quite looking like Stanley Kubrick's ultimate space fantasy, 2021 might finally be the year we're catching up.
If you visit California, you might be inclined to go to Disneyland, or jump in your convertible and take Highway 1 up the coast, or maybe make a pilgrimage to Yosemite. All very fine choices. But if you're the kind of person who revels in our planet's extremes, then it's Route 395 that you're after. This one glorious road will carry you from Death Valley's desert floor to sky-high views of Mount Whitney. You can see the 5,000-year-old bristlecone pines, the oldest living organisms. Or the bizarre tufa towers of Mono Lake. And true to California's boom and bust spirit, you can saunter around the ghost town of Bodie. What a novel experience to find an empty American city where all the businesses are shut down. To do 395 upright, it helps to have a guide, and mine is a man named Jan, and his crew, Heron,
Let's tidy up first.
and Lemmy, the hardest partying dog of all time. Jan agreed to show me some of what 395 has to offer, but only if we agreed not to disclose any locations.
My name's Jan Swirstra. I'm an industrial designer out of LA, and I spend a lot of time camping and a lot of time in the Eastern Sierra. It's a place I love, and sometimes I'm known as 395 North because my Instagram account, and I don't like to be known as that, but I'm trying to use it to set a good example and do more with it than just social media.
Where did we end up camping? We got here late last night. I wasn't even sure where we are.
This is BLM land, right on the outskirts of National Forest, and it's one of my favorite places in the world. Basically, everything outdoors wrapped into one.
Yeah. Good thing about California, man.
Oh, man. We have so much national forest and public land that you can literally just cruise out and find a place to camp. It's ours.
What I wish was mine is Jan's sweet truck.
It's a 2019 Ford Ranger. Has about 200 watts of solar in it and a fridge, and has everything that an RV has except for a toilet, but just on a smaller, simple scale.
And you drive us around day to day in LA.
Yep.
And then just roll out when you want.
It's my daily driver. Handles great. And then when I'm done with work, I can just bail and go camping. So the camper basically has only what I need. Think of it as backpacking with a car.
Yeah.
The fridge has a couple compartments. This is just a kitchen box, stove, utensils, and a bunch of stuff. This one has just dry food. Then when you get inside, there's a bed. The bed flips up, so you've got tons of room in here. This awning is phenomenal. If you want to pull that over. That's cool. Let me just pop that up.
Sorted.
So, home on wheels.
Yeah.
This is my vacation house.
Dude, it's so nice, man. Even with his nomad lifestyle, Jan faces the same big question as the rest of us. Do the internet and smartphones have to ruin everything? When you find the super special, beautiful spots, is that you busting out a map and like looking where it might be cool to go, or is it word of mouth and just getting to know people, the locals? And
if I see a dirt road, I just want to go down it. So a lot of it's just aimless rambling. It's a desire to just see something. Check that out. For some reason, it's more fulfilling than getting a recommendation from somebody. Or there's tons of apps and websites now, road trip apps, camping apps. They've proliferated. The knowledge is accessible on the internet, right? I used to fight the geotags, and I would get really pissed off. Like, why are you posting this place? It's gonna blow up, it's gonna get trashed. Now I've realized that you can't fight it. The internet has just shrunk the world. So we're not gonna stop it. We're not gonna stop people from going there. So I'm a lot more focused in conversation now with trying to set a good example. When you go, pick up your trash. When you're pooping out in the wilderness, don't leave your toilet paper on the top. You know, make sure you follow, good steps for leaving no trace.
as a thank you for this quick guide to pooping etiquette, we made Jan, Heron, and Lemmy some tacos. And we all took in the night sky and knocked back a couple of drinks. Take that, Apocalypse. The thing about good times and serenity in 2020 is that they're fleeting at best. After we split up from Jan and continued on our way, smoke started to envelop us. The plus side was that our RV no longer smelled like feet. The downside was breathing. My man David here suggested that we try and outflank the smoke by cutting through Yosemite. Without a reservation, we had to talk our way in.
Yes, no stopping, no getting out, and yeah, don't go in the valley. Yeah, no problem. We just wanted to get through.
It was a beautiful choice. Glad we got out of the smoke. Whoa, okay. But not quite as effective as we had hoped.
Fast forward 4 hours or so, and we had managed to trade the smoky majesty of Yosemite for the smoky,
Look at it.
strip malls of the Central Valley.
We have made it sort of out of the smoke all the way across Yosemite National Park and here to the gorgeous Central Valley of California. We're off to see a kind of surprising tech startup that is making some pretty strange machines to serve all the growers out in this region. And we're here in this near Fresno. This is California farm country, right?
We're just south of Fresno, a town called Kingsburg. So we're right in the Central Valley of California. Very, very large farming valley here. It's kind of considered the breadbasket of the world.
The Central Valley stretches out over about 20,000 square miles, and the farmers here produce about 1/4 of the food that Americans eat, including a whole lot of fruits and nuts.
Tell me a little bit of the background of Gus. I know some of this is like a family business. The roots of this go back a ways. Tell me kind of like how we got to what's essentially like a startup, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. So the founder of our company is Dave Crinklaw, and he started the business back in 1982. He started with is basically with his dad was commercial spraying of trees and vineyards. Got to the point where our biggest challenge was labor, just the shortage of it, really. He was forced into innovating, and he had this idea for quite some time about doing a driverless sprayer, and it finally got to the point where he said, you know what, I either got to get out of this business or I'm going to innovate.
Organic or not, crops need to be sprayed, and this process has to take place a few times a year. This means hiring a lot of people to work long hours under serious pressure. And so, just like the tech bros to the north, Gus decided to solve all of its problems with robots.
On this like labor point, you guys have set this up where you can have somebody in a truck and that one person can monitor, I think like 8 of these.
In order to operate Gus, you have one guy or girl that sits in a pickup and they monitor from a laptop computer. So that person is basically just watching all the vehicles on the screen. They can monitor up to 8 of them at a time while they're out there spraying in the orchard. And so that user interface really provides them with all the information they need to make sure that the machines are safe and that they're doing the correct job. So it tells them what speed they're driving, the engine RPM, the amount of gallonage per acre that they're applying at any given time. So if any one of the machines has an issue, it's going to send an alert to that laptop.
Much like a self-driving car, these beasts use GPS, LiDAR, and cameras to see and navigate the world around them. They also rely on pre-built maps of the orchards for extra guidance. Gus builds the machines right here, and then takes them out for robot training on this orchard next door. It's here that the company learns if the machines will behave and do as their software and human masters command.
So this is kind of like this is a test orchard where you guys put it through the paces and work on the technology?
Yeah, so this is our test orchard right here. It's right by our building, as you can see in the background. So every new machine, as it comes off the assembly line, it's put through a commissioning test right here. We test all the sensors on the machine, autonomous computer, all the safety systems, make sure it's doing what it's doing prior to when it's delivered to a customer.
So what's it doing now?
So right now he's doing a test spray. So he's just turning the water on to make sure that the system comes up to pressure, spraying water out of the nozzles just to make sure it's all functioning properly.
Okay. It's got like a crazy turbine at the back, or?
Yeah, so it's basically just a big fan.
Okay.
And that fan's driven off of the Cummins diesel motor, and it just basically creates a big airflow.
Gus is already selling these vehicles to brave modern farmers. and people the world over have taken notice of its machines.
And have you just sold them in the Central Valley or like throughout the U.S. or even overseas, or where are they going?
Yeah, so right now the majority of our machines are here in California in the Central Valley. However, we do have machines and customers in Florida, in the citrus industry over there, as well as Australia.
And I think you started selling them in like December of 2019?
Yeah,
right?
So we started taking orders early last year for the sprayers, and the first deliveries we made were in December of 2019.
Okay,
so.
And how much do they cost each?
So our retail price on these machines is $285,000.
So it's not a small investment, but I'm sure the regular sprayers aren't cheap.
Yeah,
either.
I mean, we're honestly not too far away from conventional equipment on our price, and the main thing is that the return on investment is very, very quick due to all the labor savings and the increased efficiency. I mean, these machines, they just thrive. But basically what we're doing, besides this machine, this is our first machine. We call it Orchard Gus, mainly designed for your nut trees, as well as citrus and fruit. In the future, we're working on a few other projects. We're going to do more machines. One of them is actually a vineyard sprayer. So vineyards are much tighter spacing, so the machine has to be physically smaller. And then we've got our eyes on doing a lot of other innovating.
That right there, friends, is a Central Valley farmer putting his whole fruit basket on the table. Gary's TED Talk can't be far off. And with that, it was time to get back in the RV and to confront what happens when three men are bested by their own failings and the forces of entropy. Next on Hello World, we cruise into the Mojave Desert in search of a lunar lander.
We have instruments that we are going to deliver to the South Pole of the Moon in December of 2022. Instruments that are trying to scan the surface of the moon.
And hang with a test pilot who walked away from this.
Meet Betty. She lives by herself, but for the last few months, she hasn't been alone.
LQ, tell me a joke.
Did you hear about the claustrophobic astronaut?
No.
Apparently, he just needed a little space.
Most technology isn't made for 93-year-olds. But this woman is making sure that this particular robot is.
I like you. Who are you?
She's researching the way we interact with machines. And if she has her way, robots will soon be a trusty companion for all of us.
My name is LQ. How can I help you?
As technology replaces old jobs, it's also creating new ones. I'm Aki Ito, and I'm here to show you the jobs of the future.
My name is Danielle Ishak, and I am a human-robot interaction researcher. It's really hard to intuitively design a robot meant for a consumer audience. You have to make sure that it's a robot that people want, people know how to use, and people value.
Danielle works for an Israeli startup called Intuition Robotics. Its U.S. office is here in downtown San Francisco.
Hello.
Hey Danielle, it's Aki.
Come on in.
The company is funded by a couple big names like Samsung and Toyota. Full disclosure, Bloomberg's venture capital arm is an investor too.
This is LEQ.
Can I take her out for a spin?
Please.
LEQ, tell me what you can do.
I am a proactive social robot designed for older adults. I can connect you to your family and friends, and even play music.
These features might remind you of the Amazon Echo, but you'd be missing the point if you compared her to a smart speaker. She's not meant to just be useful. She's meant to be a companion.
Why don't you take a break and have a drink?
And that's why she has a head that can nod and make other subtle gestures you might expect from a pet.
Through our research with older adults, we're finding that almost on a daily basis, we see that somebody tells her that they love her.
Really?
Or that they like her. Or that they miss
Literally,
her.
I love you?
Mm-hmm. They'll also tell her, I'm depressed, or I'm lonely. They'll open up to her in a way that they might not necessarily open up to a human because they don't feel like they'll be judged.
LEQ isn't on sale yet. But a prototype is already in the homes of about a dozen early testers who live in the Bay Area.
LEQ, tell me what the weather is today.
Danielle's job is to figure out what's working and what's not.
Sorry, please rephrase your request.
And she does that by visiting each of her testers twice a month.
How important are these visits to your job?
They're critical. We're building a product for people who we are not. I'm not a senior, and how could you know how to design for somebody if you don't do research? Because otherwise, you would just be designing in the dark.
Jobs like Danielle's are just starting to emerge. Until recently, robots were mostly in factories, separated from humans. But now, they're finally getting cheap enough, small enough, and smart enough to be in our homes. This has created a whole new challenge of designing robots that people will actually want to interact with. And that's where Danielle comes in. Her research has helped shape every little facet of LEQ, from the way LEQ moves to the way she talks.
It's a very special job, and it can be really hard, and it can be really frustrating, but at the end of the day, it's incredibly rewarding. And I think the most rewarding part about it is when I see the joy on the users' faces, like that they saw their feedback turned into something real.
Today, we've driven east of San Francisco to go see one of Danielle's research participants.
LEQ, tell me something interesting.
Did you know that Ronald Reagan was a lifeguard in high school and saved 77 people's lives?
Now, see, this is where a conversation is. She should open up and I should say, no, I did not know that. I expect her to be able to continue a conversation for at least a couple of comments.
Yeah. And why is that?
Why?
Yeah.
Because that's companionship.
When Betty was around Danielle's age, she was working with some of history's very first computers.
When I was finishing up my master's degree, I was working at Harvard in the computer lab when they were building Mark IV. A large room-sized computer. But now, this artificial intelligence stuff is amazing. LEQ?
Yes?
Schedule a doctor's appointment.
No problem. I'm working on it.
When Danielle brought along the idea of working with robotics for the elderly, I said, are you kidding me? Will older people connect to a robot? And she said, I don't know, let's research and find out.
Danielle grew up here in this suburb of Atlanta. Her parents spent much of their childhoods in Israel and met in the US.
We as immigrants, we understood that we might need to work a little harder. In fact, I feel that rather than taken away from Danielle, it gave her so much more, because she understood the fact that you need to run after your dreams and work really hard no matter what the challenges are.
School didn't come easily for Danielle.
I have dyslexia, and that very much affected my self-esteem academically.
The principal of the school did not recommend her to take advanced classes. She fought for it, and she got into it, and she did very well with them too.
Danielle's first job out of grad school was at X, the secretive research facility founded by Google. It's known for dreaming up all kinds of wacky, far-flung ideas.
Can you tell us about the moonshots you worked on?
No, I can't tell you too much about the projects that I worked on. I can say that I was working on robotics.
She loved the job, but wanted to work on something that would reach real consumers sooner. So she left X after a year and joined Intuition Robotics. She's been working in the field for 4 years now, and it took her a while to find her footing in a male-dominated industry.
I've gone to different meetups where there'll be like a circle of men with their like zip-up jacket with their like company logo on it and a beer in their hand. And I'll come in with lipstick and nobody wants to talk to me. This is my closet.
So at first she did her best to fit in, wearing a pair of glasses she didn't need and toning down her style.
So what's the kind of thing you used to wear to a conference?
Stuff like this, blousey things that make you look like you're 40.
But that got old after a while.
And what's the kind of thing you wear now?
Now it's like I just enjoy being kind of expressive and playful in what I wear.
Before we wrap up for the day, Danielle has one more LEQ tester to visit. Joseph is 97. And he's had the robot in his home for 8 months.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good. How has Miss LEQ been?
She always tells me to take a drink of water, at least 4 times a day.
So, we added a whole bunch of new facts to LEQ.
Did you know that a cup of chopped red bell pepper contains more vitamin C than an orange?
Okay. What did you think of that?
Certainly, the print was, I could see that quite clearly.
What about this?
Well, I can see that. LEQ, play music.
No problem. It will begin shortly.
By 2050, almost 500 million people are going to be 80 or older. And if current trends continue, more and more are going to be like Joseph and Betty, living alone.
LEQ, stop.
Today, both of them are doing okay. But some of Danielle's other participants have been struggling.
Is it kind of hard to leave them at the end of the day?
It is. Some of our testers are pretty advanced in the stages of depression through loneliness and isolation. And at times, I know that LEQ is cheering them up in their day, but I know that it's only part of the way. No source of artificial intelligence robots will ever be able to replace humans and human companionship or human care.
The key to Danielle's work is to embrace that very limitation of machines.
Robots should help humans do what they love help humans interact with more humans, help humans in general, not pull humans away from humans, not take humans' jobs and leave humans without purpose.
Whether it's in our workplaces or in our homes, robots are soon going to be everywhere. And it's up to Danielle to make sure this robot-filled future leaves us just a little better off.
So don't be afraid. And if you are afraid, come and join us, because I promise it's a friendly place.
Times are tough. Jobs are scarce. It's risky to be outside and around others. It seems like there's very few ways to make extra money during a pandemic. So I guess I'll just hunker down and binge social media until this all blows over. Wait, don't these people make money? How do these people make money? Streamers, YouTubers, Twitch stars. How do they make money? Is it a lot? Is it a lot of work? I know, I gotta ask somebody in the biz, and I got just the guy. Austin John Plays.
This is your full-time job now, right?
As of November of last year, yes. This was always just kind of like a side thing. Like, any money that I made from doing my videos and whatever else, I never touched that because I didn't really think of that as being like real money. And then it started coming in more and more. And then it was like I hit my first day that I broke $1,000 and I was like, this is actually going to be money.
How did the YouTube channel come to be?
When the game Pokemon Sun and Moon came out for the 3DS, there was like things that I learned about the game, and then I wanted to just share that information with people. And at the time, I didn't have any way to capture a screen or anything, so I found like generic footage and I kind of put it all together with so much editing. And that video got 6 views. And then 2 days later, I made another one, and that one got 12 views. And then I just started pumping out more and more content, and people were like, this guy knows what he's talking about. It really just started building on top of itself, and then it was like, my channel really focuses on tips and tricks. So I play a straight 18 hours, and I'll finish the game or get to about the 40-hour mark, and then I'll make my first video. While I'm going through, I have a giant notepad and just scribbles everywhere, and I make these notes of like the things that stumped me, so I know the things that may stump other people.
What do you need to think about if you're building your YouTube channel?
1, you need to do something that you're passionate about. Not that you like, not that you think you're gonna make money on, something you're passionate about. The other thing is something that other people are passionate about. It holds a special place to them. And third is, it needs to be something that people are gonna seek out information on. In order to enter into the marketplace, you either need to be better than everyone else, you either need to be faster than everyone else, or you need to be more accessible than everyone else. And you can't be more accessible because it's already on the platform. Granted, if you understand how the algorithm works, which is very similar to Google Analytics, then yeah, you can have a little bit of a head start. But if you're not doing it faster, and if you're not doing it better than everyone else, then why should anyone watch your channel? So my income as a YouTuber kind of breaks down to 3 different ways. 1, which is the bulk of it, which is ad revenue. Whenever you go and you watch a video and then there's an ad and then you wait 5 seconds and you hit the bottom right corner and then you go on to the next video, or a non-skippable ad, or the video starts immediately, you get the little banner ad at the bottom, or if you scroll down from the video, the first thing that shows there is an ad. Those are the 4 different types of ads that can appear on every single YouTube video. And all of them pay a certain amount. It varies on lots of things, like the country of the person who posts it, the country of the person who watches it, the time of year, where you are in the quarter, if there's anything going on with a reduction in ad revenue. Like, great example, COVID-19, companies weren't spending as much on advertising. So because of that, CPM went down. CPM stands for click per thousand. I'm using the Roman numeral for 1,000. And that means that for every 1,000 views, you get a certain amount of money. Now, on low ads, when I first started off, my CPM was 30 cents. So every 1,000 views, I made 30 cents. But then once I signed with an MCN and I started making more quality content and more engaging content, some of my better videos and certain times of the year, I can see CPMs as high as $12 to $14. And there's a big fluctuation between, you know, if I post a video when there's no ads being spent like January and February, that's a reason a lot of your favorite YouTubers and also TV shows don't post new videos in that time of year because ad rates are down. Why are they going to make content then? Instead, you're recording and you're bulking up for when ad revenue is higher. The second way that a YouTuber makes income is support, crowdfunding, things like that. When I first started off, Patreon was really the only option, but then they started rolling out supporters and members for YouTube channels. So whenever I have a live stream, you can click a button and then you can become a member, and then you get special icons next to your name. I believe they're called badges, or on any video, you can hit the join button and that helps support the channel. And then the third aspect of that would be merch. And for me, my merch has been somewhat basic. In fact, I'm wearing one of my t-shirts from last year right now. You have to endure the times that your first video gets 6 views, that you posted on Reddit and they say, shut up, and then an auto mod bans you. You have to go through that, because until you go through that and you discover why you're doing it, you're not doing it for other people, you're doing it for yourself. If you're not loving what you do, then it's not worth it.
Huh. So make a channel about something that I'm passionate about. Oh, sweet. I guess I can make the channel about that. Now, how do I grow an audience? How do I get popular?
It's all about diversification, right? You have to have a massive Twitter following. You have to have a massive Instagram following. You have to have a massive YouTube following. Of course, you have to be on Twitch, which is the key platform. But basically, any way you can get in front of your audience, you can engage with your audience, is going to drive those clicks, which ultimately drives the advertiser revenue that you get back from all of these platforms.
It's me and Dan playing video games and talking in a funny manner over them.
They're not just people who are good at games, they're actually people who are good at online engagement, online entertainment, first and foremost.
You have the right to remain stylish. Anything you wear can and will be used against you in the court of fashion.
The streamer is either very, very talented at the game. The best player in the game is generally going to draw a crowd because people like watching people who are very good. On the other hand, they're either very, very good or funny, charismatic, whatever it is on that side.
Oh, no.
You know, it becomes more of a show where they talk about other things outside of the gaming world, and gaming becomes really just a backdrop and an excuse to engage with that audience.
There were those weird, like, Ronald McDonald, like, straight to VHS movies. You remember those?
I'm personable, I'm chatty. I would kind of, you know, when boring things were happening in the game, I would ramble on about, you know, movies I'd watched or books I'd read and, you know, or conversations I'd had and stuff like that. And so I think being personable was a big part of that.
It's not just getting on and playing games. It's getting on and being an entertainer. You are putting on a show.
All right, now let me go ahead and grab the samurai sword that every gym has. Okay, he's dead.
To have a larger audience and to have that audience, I think, stay with you, you have to bring something extra. You know, you have to find your niche. You have to find what works and what connects with the audience and what makes them laugh and what makes them keep coming back.
You gotta make it a little more exciting, all right? Throwing a hang.
I think the real most important thing is to just get used to being on camera. Like in any sort of performance thing, is get used to talking on camera. You know, my first few videos were terrible, but because I sat down and did it for 6 to 8 hours a day, I just got used to talking and I got over that uncomfortable hump.
If you go into Twitch purely with the expectation that you're going to make money, make a job out of it, have all this growth, and it's going to be great, you're probably going to burn out prior to getting to that point, because there's very little payoff for a long time, right? Like multiple years generally before you really start to see a payoff. And so, you know, those first few times you're streaming, nobody is there. One person shows up every 30 minutes, says hi maybe, and leaves, right? Like, it's very discouraging, I think, for a lot of people. And so you have to be there just loving it. You have to love talking to yourself when nobody is around. You have to love just the game that you're playing, all of that stuff, because it takes a while. And I think a majority of people burn out prior to getting to the like profitable point of it.
And there you have it. My very own YouTube, Twitch, Discord, and streaming channels all ready to go live. It's a veritable social media ecosystem just on the verge of thriving. So, don't forget to smash like and subscribe, and visit my Patreon for perks. Also, go to my merch page. And one last thing, stay cool, my friends.
This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine, plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio.
Can I just say, I have missed you.
I missed you too.
There's nothing like a Matt Miller. They should put it in like a little pill or something, or maybe a gummy.
A gummy.
Oh. Speaking of gummies, we're going to talk about cannabis today, aren't we?
Oh, nice. Yeah, we are. From a pretty serious financial investor perspective, we have a guest who is part of an amazing brother-sister duo, and we're going to talk about their ETF.
Yeah, we are, indeed. On a day when everybody else is talking about AI and really NVIDIA, because, man, they came out yesterday, big boost in their outlook. And do you know NVIDIA is the top-performing stock in the S&P 500?
Knocked the cover off the ball. Unbelievable. You know, people thought this is so much hype. It was already up 109% before they came out with earnings year to date. And
It's crazy.
They delivered earnings that just wowed Wall Street. So
can I just say, do you look at their market cap versus like a little known chip player called Intel?
Intel? Yes.
Like, it just blows my mind. Anyway, we are going to talk about NVIDIA. We're also going to talk about the Business Week cover story that Matt ran front to cover. Mm-hmm. It's about Adidas or Adidas. What do you say?
Well, I say Adidas, but famously, Run DMC says Adidas. My Adidas. I won't even...
Who is right?
You know what? You can say it however you like, but of course the founder's name was Adi Dassler, which is why Germans say Adidas.
Either way that you say it, it's got a problem now that Yi is gone. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about...
now that who's gone?
Yi.
I think it's Ye.
Oh, is it Ye?
You mean Kanye, right?
All right. Little girl from New Jersey. That's what I'm doing.
I could be wrong. I could be wrong.
I'm sure you are right on something like that. Oh, man. For those on radio, yes, Miss Masser is blushing a little bit. We're also going to talk about the $1 trillion global aging sector. I can actually say that correctly. And then we're going to talk about the 15% pledge. So we got a lot coming up.
Yes, we do. I'm looking
Yay.
forward to it. And
you know, does it really matter? Because he changes his name all the time. I mean, does it really matter?
No, it doesn't.
He's soon going to be,
No,
you know, the
it
performer
doesn't.
known as nothing.
Exactly.
All right.
You are not marked down in my book.
All right, time for Countdown to the Close on radio and TV.
Countdown to the close. Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage ahead of the U.S. market close starts right now.
This is the countdown to the close. About 60 minutes left to go here in the trading session. Romaine Bostic joined right now by Katie Greifeld, as well as our colleagues Carol Massar and Matt Miller. Welcome to all of our audiences across our Bloomberg platforms, television, radio, originals, and yes, Carol Massar, those folks still streaming on YouTube.
Yes, indeed.
I wonder if some of those folks who are streaming on YouTube, Carol, do they have some sort of AI capability? Because I'm told that's all the rage these days.
It's euphoria, AI euphoria. I mean, it's really kind of crazy. And I mean, time will tell.
I think a new company just started today called AI Euphoria. And it's up about 100%.
I kind of like it. I kind of like it. Having said that, that's certainly on everybody's radar today, mine included. Some of the companies linked to the AI frenzy definitely off and running. We know it was going on, right? NVIDIA last night, you guys covered it, up with an incredible forecast on the outlook. And this is really, I think, the company, NVIDIA in particular, really most identified with AI at this point. Top performing stock in the S&P 500, up, 160-something percent. NVIDIA up another 25% today, so soaring. You have that name top in the S&P 500, the NASDAQ 100. AMD also up, riding that frenzy, if you will, up almost 10%. But what's interesting, and Matt and I were just talking about the difference in market caps, Intel not enjoying this run up. It's down about 6% here. And if you look at the AI ETF, it's actually gaining about 1.5% today, but it's not up a lot this year, I should say.
Well, and there's no breadth. I mean, Romaine, I think you brought this up yesterday.
Yeah.
We don't see a lot breadth. And I saw
AI stuff or broad?
No, in the markets overall. And I saw a great chart that illustrates how little we are all coming along for this rally, right? The breadth has just dropped to levels we haven't seen since 1999, and that brings up, thoughts of the internet bubble. So maybe this is a little bit of an AI bubble that we're watching as well right now.
Well, I was looking at earlier too, just to your point, Matt. I mean, when you just crunch the numbers on the Bloomberg terminal, you can see the contribution of individual members to the gains that we've had in the market. Right now, as of today, NVIDIA accounts for about like a fifth of the gains that we've had in the NASDAQ 100. Right. But there's really only 4 or 5 other stocks, Apple, Microsoft, Meta, and a couple others you throw in there. And that explains basically 80% of the gains that we've had on a year-to-date basis. As far as today here, you take a look at the board here, NASDAQ composite up 1.5%, the NASDAQ 100 up more than 2%, the S&P getting a bit of a lift as well, as NVIDIA is a member there. That's up about 0.8%, but you strip out NVIDIA and anything AI, and you're not really getting much else. The Dow down about 0.2%, Katie, and the Russell down about 0.9.
Well, it's the same thing on the sector level as well. If you take a look by that measure, 4 sectors in the green, 7 in the red. This is pretty amazing. Technology is up 4.3%. The S&P 500 only up about 0.8% total. So, I mean, tech really pulling its weight there. Then you have real estate, communication services, industrials up as well. You look at what some of the biggest drags to the downside are. It's energies, it's utilities, it's healthcare. All told, we're still green.
Yeah, I was trying to find something moving that actually wasn't tied to the AI space. Carnival Corp actually up about 3% here on the day. An interesting upgrade a little bit earlier by the folks over at Citi, saying that a lot of the momentum that started when it comes to the cruise line industry overall, that they expect that momentum to actually increase deeper into the year. Meanwhile, I thought it was interesting that you saw Caesars and some of the casino stocks moving lower on the day, and that was largely in the back of some sell-side commentary that wasn't necessarily as bearish there, though some of that has to do with regional exposure that some of those folks are concerned about. But of course, we have to go back to AI. It's not just NVIDIA up 25%, Super Micro also up 25%, Advanced Micro devices right now up about 10% here on the day. And you flip up the board, you take a look at one of the main ETFs that tracks this space, the BOTS ETF. Well, it's been the big outperformer here relative to the S&P 500. BOTS on the top, the blue line at the bottom, that's the S&P 500, a pretty big differential, at least based on what we've seen so far to start 2023.
Have we ever heard Jay Powell talk about artificial intelligence yet?
I guarantee you he'll be asked about it in about 2 weeks.
I'm guessing as well. In the meantime, mostly what Fed folks are talking about is what's going on in terms of the monetary policy, where rates are headed. To pause or not to pause seems to be the big debate. And weighing in on that is the president of the Boston Fed. We're talking about Susan Collins, speaking to students at the Community College of Rhode Island earlier. Here's what she had to say.
While inflation is still too high, there are some promising signs of moderation. And I believe that we may be at or near the point where monetary policy can pause raising interest rates, and this will provide an opportunity to more fully assess the impact of the actions we've taken to date.
And of course, that was Susan Collins, president of the Boston Fed. But, you know, this whole idea of maybe take a pause, right? And the lag effect, right? It is going to take a while for all of the interest rate increases that we've seen, from the Fed to really take effect. And so maybe they do need to just kind of hold back and let things kind of stew for a bit.
I mean, just real quickly, though, Matt,
Sure.
I mean, I was just looking. I just saw a headline across the wire right now, a 2-year yield spiking. We're up about 13, 14 basis points on a 2-year yield right now. And you're seeing similar moves across the yield space. And I wonder if that is a bet that maybe that pause isn't quite there.
Well, and I wonder also how much this, and people have been saying this a lot over the last few days, debate over the debt ceiling, raising the debt ceiling or not to, pushing us to the brink. How much does that tighten financial conditions? How much does that do in terms of, an artificial rate hike, if you will? A lot of people have suggested that makes up about 25 basis points. Others have said no, because we're going to get a deal next week and then it's going to be gone and you'll never remember it ever happened in the first place.
10 straight days of selling that we've been seeing, at least on the shorter end of the curve there with the Treasury. 4 straight days of gains for the dollar. And the headline crossing the wire, Katie Greifeld, the yen versus the dollar. 140. First time we've seen that in 6 months.
And then all the while you do have equities rallying. I mean, NVIDIA definitely helping out today. And maybe that moots the impact that you're seeing when it comes to tightening financial conditions. I think it's really interesting, and some people would say you're just torturing language at this point, but the conversation switching from a pause to a skip for what it means for the Fed. I mean, skip, you would think, implies that there's more hikes coming. It seems like if you look at the front end of the Treasury curve, maybe the markets are buying into that message.
Who are these some people that you're talking about? Are these just the voices in your head, or are these real people you're in?
Some
debate
people
that I have with myself. Yeah.
Aren't traders still pricing in some rate cuts later on this year?
They are, but then you look at the next 2 meetings. There's a full
go look at work. Did you look at work today?
Cuts.
I know, but they were pricing in a 47% chance of a hike for June, a 47% chance of a hike for July.
Thank you.
Yes.
But then lower.
What happens?
Cuts.
Okay, Carol, ever the optimist. How do you deal with that every day, Matt?
I love it. I'm so thankful when she's here.
All right, guys, we will be back with some optimism and pessimism, I'm sure, in less than an hour's time. Our cross-platform coverage, radio, TV, YouTube, and, of course, on Bloomberg Originals. We're going to count you down to the close on this Thursday. Join us for Beyond the Bell at 4 p.m. Wall Street time. Pessimist about the S&P 500. It's ultimately going to go actually even higher.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I thought it was crazy at the end of last year, beginning of this year, when we saw strategists' forecasts for the S&P to be exactly where it already was 12 months later, right? And everybody was painting his or her own picture. Maybe we have a dip in the first half and come back in the second half. But now you're starting to see some real bulls come out of the woodwork, including Andrew Sliman over at Morgan Stanley, and Savita Subramanian over at B of A, raising their price targets to, I think, pretty substantial gains.
4,600 by Andrew Sliman. And then Savita, what is she going to? New range of
4,300.
Yeah. 4,300. Oh, thank you. All right, so you just heard a voice.
Oh, we have Jess Menton in the studio, I'm very happy to say. She covers the stock market for us very adeptly, and
also Michael McKee.
Exactly.
International Economics and Policy Correspondent at Bloomberg News. I didn't want to leave out, Mike. We've got the whole team here. I do want to start with you, though, Mike, because what is the backdrop here? We got some data today in terms of weekly jobless and a little bit more. So it tells us what?
It doesn't tell us a whole lot is the problem. And it is a very confusing time, and I salute the people who have raised their S&P forecast, because I guess they're making an implicit forecast that we don't have any kind of recession in the near future. But the numbers we're getting at this point don't really matter to the Fed as much as what we will get tomorrow, which is the PCE inflation number and the CPI, which will come in on the 13th, the day before their next Fed decision. Also, the jobs numbers. Those two categories are the only thing the Fed cares about at this point. And for the last couple of weeks, we've heard, and we saw in the minutes yesterday of their last meeting, we've heard a real division among Fed officials whether they should raise rates more or pause and see what's happening with the economy. So until we get those big numbers, I think we're not going to know a whole lot about where we're going. Fortunately, you don't have to wait long. 8:30 tomorrow morning, Wall Street time, we get the PCE information.
I wonder when was the last time we had a recession with 3.5% unemployment? Or maybe
I think we could
better put is the question. The better put question is, what's the lowest unemployment we've had in a recession over, say, the last century? Have we seen, Mike, a recession with just 4% unemployment or just 4.5%?
We haven't. I don't know what the lowest going into a recession is, but when you get into recessions, unemployment always tends to rise rather rapidly. There's the famous rule that once you go up an average of 0.3% over 3 months, then you don't stop until you get up about 3 more percentage points. So this is very uncharted territory. We did have very low inflation in the late 1990s, and then we had the tech bubble pop, and so we had a sort of mini recession then. But beyond that, I don't think there's any kind of situation that's been like this. So it's very hard for Fed officials, and therefore very hard for traders to figure out what is going to happen going forward.
All right, Jess, come on in here. So in terms of what investors are thinking here, like Katie just talked about, what we're seeing in the equity.
Slightly different kinds of people.
They're So what are they focusing on that gives them some of the enthusiasm to basically up their S&P targets?
Well, typically they're late to do this, right? Like think about last year after the
wait,
half
they
sell-off.
don't get it right?
Oh, I mean, come on, sell side.
Sorry.
I mean, there's a track record there, but typically they are later to move there. But you're seeing begin like Savita Subramanian over at Bank of America, to your point earlier, Carol, moving that target up to 4,300. Actually had been around 4,000, which was kind of in line when you look at the average for analysts in general on Wall Street coming into this year. They really felt like by the time we get to the end of this year, the S&P 500 would have been just basically unchanged from the end of last year. But now, think about just coming off basically toward the tail end of earnings season for the first quarter, things coming in a lot better than expected. But obviously, we tend to see this move, right, from companies where you lower the bar to more easily beat those expectations. So the question is whether or not we've seen that trough, because you and I have talked a lot about, right, how energy was basically masking a lot of the pain last year. So it wasn't necessarily that we just went into an earnings recession. It actually started, if you take out energy from the S&P, at the second quarter of last year. So do we begin to see better times ahead, those expectations potentially for double-digit growth a year from now, but still a lot of question marks, right, given economic growth, and how do you square that away with EPS growth?
By the way, the markets look like they're on fire right now because of tech. The S&P 500 year to date is up 8.25%. But if you look at the equal weighted index, SPW index, it's actually down year to date.
It is
1.25%.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I did a story recently with another reporter, Alex Simonova, on our equities team, who's new here. And we actually were taking a look at the divergence there. And actually, Bank of America was arguing typically when you see that doesn't necessarily mean that's bad for the broader market. It's just typically because actually there's more issues as far as what it means for when you're seeing a big divergence with the ratio of bigger cap tech versus some of these smaller, more components there. You do see sort of a divergence there, but typically that actually usually leads to broader gains in the equity market.
Because the rest of the market can actually gain.
Correct, but the big thing is, right, but the issue right now is we have to see, when I'm talking to strategists, more breadth there, not just when you have a handful of technology stocks.
So Mike, come on back in here. In terms of the economic, we've talked about this a lot, the economic backdrop for companies out there to grow top and bottom line. I mean, is it there? And I mean, right, some of the data, the statistical data, it takes into account corporate profits.
Yes, which is an interesting situation, because we got the first look at corporate profits for the first quarter today in the revised GDP numbers, and they were down. But if you take the Federal Reserve out of the numbers, they were up. So because the Fed is, their treasuries are worth less now.
Right. We're living in a world of caveats within the economic data points, it feels like.
Oh, well, that's why we have two hands.
That's how it goes, yeah.
That's how it goes. It's what you're going to get. But the outlook is everybody has been expecting a recession, and it just doesn't happen, and it just doesn't happen. And I think what you're seeing now is some of these strategists are saying, well, if it's not going to happen, we're not going to wait for it. We'll just call a higher market because we're making money and things look better. But maybe something does start to change, and that's one of the reasons we'll be looking at the jobs numbers very closely to see if hiring really slows down. And if it does, then maybe you can make an argument that people will have less money to spend.
We still have 1 week and 1 month until the third quarter begins. Second quarter is over, right? And don't forget that Anna Wong, her model has a 100% chance of recession in the second quarter. So
she's pretty negative.
Those are pretty strong chances.
Right?
And in terms of jobs, Mike, Carol and I have talked to Danny Blanchflower a couple of times, and he says the unemployment number and really the whole jobs report is fairly useless.
Yeah, I've had that argument with him as well. He also says that because consumer confidence fell, we are in recession now, but it sure doesn't look like it or feel like it. So I
doesn't really
think
feel like it.
It doesn't.
I don't think you can base anything on any one number or even a set of numbers. It's kind of an overall condition where the economy is contracting and people are losing work. And right now, that is not the case.
Mike, do we ultimately have, recessions are often rolling recessions. I thought I heard on surveillance this morning. But a rolling recession, so it never really feels so bad?
Well, you can get very low growth, and I guess you could have that continuously, and that would be somebody's view of a rolling recession. If you get growth of 1% or less, it's going to feel like a recession. You probably do see unemployment go up. But right now, and I've cautioned against this many times, don't take the Atlanta Fed GDP now numbers as gospel because they've only got a month's worth of second quarter data in them, but they're looking at growth of 2.9%. And so that is very strong growth. I'm sure it will come down, but it would have to come down an awful lot.
Mike, I don't know. I think either like a mouse crawled up Matt's leg or something.
I'm getting goosebumps.
He's doing strange things. What's up?
No, because Jess Menton just pointed out, I was looking at the equal weighted S&P 500 and hadn't clicked on the moving averages button. We're nearing a death cross.
So, yes, that actually did happen for the equal
A death cross.
But this is something that definitely can trigger technicians when we talk about it, because actually it's not always a bad thing. Bank of America was arguing that since 1992, when you do look at this, typically it does precede solid returns. Does that mean it's going to happen this time around? Obviously, we don't have a crystal ball.
Wait, a death cross precedes solid returns? So this is when the 50-day moving average goes below the 100-day moving, 200-day moving average.
So the shorter term indication is more negative than the longer term.
I see it happening on the 10th, about the 10th.
Correct.
It's terrifying, no?
No, it actually potentially bodes well when you're looking at...
Well, they should rename it.
They should. It's a lagging indicator.
The life
should be called the golden
It's
cross.
a lagging indicator.
Oh, my God.
Let's see.
All right, we're going to work on renaming it. Michael McKee, thank you as always. Mike is, of course, international economics and policy correspondent at Bloomberg News. As he said, we're going to get that PCE data tomorrow, so important for us to check out. Jess Menton, thank you as always. My sometime co-host, deputy team leader, always for U.S. equities at Bloomberg News. This is Bloomberg.
events, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 3:21 on Wall Street. We've got the Dow lower, the S&P, NASDAQ. They are both advancing. NVIDIA is surging by 26%. Right now, the Dow down 32, drop there of 0.1%. S&P up 39, higher by 1%. NASDAQ up 234 points, up 1.9%. NASDAQ 100 index up 2.7%, but this is not a broad-based rally. Russell 2000 down now by 0.8%. But a rally in companies linked to the frenzy in AI is outweighing broader market concerns, including a debt default. Also on the minds of investors, the next Fed meeting and the odds of a rate increase. Lindsay Rosner is a senior portfolio manager at PJO.
We are seeing a strong economy, and then you marry that with the Fed speak that we just got that said everybody really wanted to hike, and that June now is pricing in a 65% chance of a hike.
Cathie Wood's flagship exchange-traded fund closed out its NVIDIA stake in early January. Then came the AI frenzy that sent the stock and its big tech peers on a tear. The chipmaker has added around $560 billion in market cap since Wood dumped her shares. 10-year yield 3.82% with a 2-year at 4.52%. Spot gold now at $19.41 the ounce, down 0.8%, and West Texas Intermediate crude down 3.3%. $71.92 a barrel. Recapping, we are looking at a mixed day on Wall Street. The Dow lower, S&P, NASDAQ, they are both higher. NVIDIA shares surging 26%. And that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Carol Massar along with Matt Miller live here on Bloomberg Business Week. Hey, just a little bit more on NVIDIA. Charlie mentioned that Cathie Wood seemed to close out her position, it looks like, of NVIDIA earlier this year. Oops, but if you read through the story by our Emily Graffeo, it says when ARK first launched back in 2014, NVIDIA was one of the fund's top holdings. Since the fund's inception, NVIDIA contributed about 13% of the fund's 112% total return, according to our data. And our own Eric Balchunas, senior ETF analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, who you talk to a lot, says, quote, I'm sure Cathie would have loved to have had NVIDIA on this recent pop, but NVIDIA has been very good to her. She was into the stock before it was cool.
Right, but why would she dump it? Especially before it triples in value.
She had a reason.
I mean, if you believe in AI, this is the stock to own.
She thought it was overvalued at this time. And at this point, we shall see, right? It was early January.
Well, I hope she's shorting it now. Because if she thought it was overvalued in January, she hates it now.
The timing was tough. This was early January, right? And then we got the news that Microsoft was interested. Anyway, let's get to someone who understands why NVIDIA is off and flying this year. Ian King is U.S. semiconductor and networking reporter at Bloomberg News. He joins us on Zoom from San Francisco. Ian, NVIDIA is up another 26% today. It's up about 164% so far this year. It's the number one performer in the S&P 500 this year. We talk about it a lot, especially when it comes to AI. Is the euphoria over NVIDIA and its connection to AI justified?
There are a couple of ways to look at this. And obviously, we've had conversations on this over the last few days. And, the big question was, is anybody actually making money out of AI? We're talking about it. Is anybody making money out of it? Yesterday's announcement showed that this company really is. Valuations, that's another question, right? We're looking at, 180 times current earnings. You can decide whether that represents value for money or not, but they are putting up numbers that justify some of the hype. That's certainly true.
Yeah, so the forward PE is 54, 55, which, for a normal company would still be very rich valuation. But it's yesterday, this time it was like 65. So the E has really come up in terms of, what analysts expect. I heard a great stat yesterday, Ian, from Synovus that 65% of the chips they sell for server use are used in deep learning, are used in AI, generative language models. So it's really about AI, right? It's not just a fad. They haven't just slapped AI on the name. It really is being used, the bulk of their product, in this new technology.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there are all kinds of stats floating around at the moment that add to this, and you know, they're incredible. Another way to look at it would be, I saw another report that said NVIDIA currently has north of 80% market share in this particular segment, and guess what? During the last 3 months, 100% of the installs of this type of system were on NVIDIA equipment. So it's got a strong market share, and it's getting better. And now this is by far the company's largest source of revenue. When Matt, you were talking about, well, why would you sell out the stock? Remember, last year and this year have been a terrible year for the company's overall earnings. It's in the PC business. That's horrible. That's why you sold out, not really knowing just how strong this AI surge could be, and now we're seeing it.
Well, we don't know, but Kathy Wood's supposed to know, right? She's the future guru. You know, she's the one who's making the big bets on these things that are going to happen later on in life.
Well, look at it this way. To be fair to her, right, NVIDIA gave a projection that was 53% higher than the average analyst estimate here. So
so nobody got it right.
Embarrassed Wall Street, right? They embarrassed Wall Street, never mind one particular fund manager.
So I guess what I'm wondering is basically this ramp up where NVIDIA is benefiting, Ian, is this just as companies are exploring what they can do with AI, this version or this higher, you know, learning formula of AI, and they're trying to figure out how they basically benefit? Is that what this is, kind of an exploratory phase, in that we're not quite yet at the, hey, here's what really works and is going to pay off phase?
No, I think you're picking at something which is really important, and something which was a major topic on the conference call that they did yesterday. And that was like, look, hey, you're selling to Microsoft, you're selling to Google, you're selling to AWS, that's fantastic. But guess what? Those guys want to do their own chips. And if they're the only customers in town, sooner or later, they're going to find somebody else. So they won't need you as much. What are you going to do about it? And NVIDIA was like, you really haven't been listening to us. We believe that AI is going to be used everywhere, right? And in order for that to happen, here are these products that we've already put out there. They've done software for pharmaceuticals, software for all of the, you know, for automotive, for all of these different industries that wouldn't have these genius computer scientists who can then buy some of the service or even buy some of NVIDIA's products and use AI for themselves. So, you know, they at least had an answer to a very, very important question about where this all goes.
Wait, so does that mean they don't, and NVIDIA doesn't need a Microsoft or a Google ultimately longer term because they can tap into all these other areas, or TBD?
I mean, it's a how do they put it? A frenemy relationship right now. Microsoft needs NVIDIA's chips. NVIDIA has put some of these services it's hoping to sell to these companies in the cloud hosted by Microsoft Azure or Amazon AWS. But down the road, in an ideal world, NVIDIA is going to be selling directly to some of these companies if they can acquire that kind of expertise, or if NVIDIA can make it easy enough.
You know, Paul Sweeney, who in his former life was an investment banker, his immediate thought goes to taking advantage of this situation, right? If your stock pops like this and you are the it stock, I mean, right now, you want to own NVIDIA and you want to tell your friends that you own NVIDIA because you're the smart guy who's into AI. That could last a month, it could last 3 months, maybe it lasts a year, but probably not much longer. Are they going to raise capital? Are they going to buy something with these shares? Because they should really take advantage of this situation.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, knowing their CEO and knowing the way that they look at things, that's very much a throwback view of Silicon Valley and of, you know, the way that the markets work. They believe they're a technology company. They believe they have everything in place that they need. As you'll remember, they did try to buy ARM, and regulators around the world said, nope, you're too big, we don't like this. So they've learned that lesson. Why would they go off on something that they're probably not going to get? So that's probably the way they're looking at it.
So who competes with them ultimately?
Well, I mean, Intel, but investors don't believe them.
Holding back a
lot.
lot.
What happened to that?
Intel?
Can I just say, Matt and I, you know, Ian, going into this, we're like, did you look at Intel's market cap and did you look at NVIDIA's market? Like, it's just hard to get my head around it.
No, and it's, I mean, AMD stock went up today, right? Because they do similar things. They're nowhere near as far and advanced into this market as NVIDIA is. And in theory, Intel is there as well. Intel has been the heart of the data center for, you know, 20, 30 years. investors just aren't buying that they have a way forward here. Even though Pat Gelsinger at Intel has been talking about his new products, his accelerators, data center products, and all of these things he's going to bring to market, investors just don't believe that right now.
Intel is worth less than an eighth
Isn't that crazy?
of
it's
NVIDIA,
wild.
right? NVIDIA is trading right now, market cap $950 billion.
Yeah.
Intel is $115 million.
NVIDIA added more market cap today than Intel is worth in total.
Wow, that's a very
Wait.
strong point.
So 30 seconds left here. Come on, Ian, you've been following, I know I ask this all the time because your perspective is really valuable because you've studied this sector for so long. Does that make sense to you?
I mean, if you believe what Jensen Huang said, which is there are $1 trillion of data center equipment that needs to be replaced, right now they're in the lead. As to whether an absolute valuation makes sense in those terms, I don't know.
It's just interesting world we're living in. Ian, thank you. I know we go round and round a lot on this, but it seems to be the topic that everybody wants to talk about, either AI and or the chip sector, and you really just put it in such great perspective. Ian King, he is U.S. Semiconductor Networking Reporter at Bloomberg News on Zoom from San Francisco. Check out his work on the Bloomberg at Bloomberg.com and also on Twitter at Ian M. King. Pretty amazing stuff, huh?
Yeah, absolutely amazing. And, this is why we do this.
Is this why?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's so much fun.
It is. You want to get a check on world and national news?
Let's do that right now with Nancy Lyon. She's in our Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom in Washington, D.C. Nancy?
Thanks, Matt. The leader of the right-wing Oath Keepers group has been sentenced to 18 years in prison for his role in the 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol and for conspiring to use force to keep Donald Trump in power after he lost the election. Ed Tarpley is one of Stewart Rhodes' attorneys and spoke after the sentencing.
We think that ultimately this is going to be about free speech. We think that we have a good appeal coming on this. We look forward to the appeal, the appellate process, and, we stand firmly behind Stewart Rhodes.
Tarpley says they argued that Rhodes was not even at the Capitol on the day of the riot, but the judge in the case said he believes Rhodes poses an ongoing threat to the country and to democracy. Today's sentence is the longest one yet. 1 week and counting till the U.S. runs out of money to pay its bills. President Biden is remaining hopeful.
Speaker McCarthy and I have had several productive conversations, and our staffs continue to meet as we speak, as a matter of fact, and they're making progress.
House lawmakers have gone home for the Memorial Day weekend, but have been told they can be called back within 24 hours' notice. Okay, Boomer, America is getting older faster. Bloomberg's Nathan Hager reports.
The latest census figures show the percentage of seniors in the U.S. jumped by more than a third in the last decade, by its highest rate in 130 years. At the same time, the number of children fell. Put together, the median age in America rose from 37.2 in 2010 to 38.8 10 years later. Along with seniors living longer, more families are putting off having children till later in life. Experts say the birth rate in the U.S. still hasn't recovered from the 2008 global financial crisis. In Washington, I'm Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries.
updates, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 3:40 on Wall Street. 20 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Dow Jones Industrial Average just turning higher. S&P, NASDAQ both solidly in the green. Let's head right over to the First Word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. The NASDAQ is surging as NVIDIA soars after earnings. The Dow is currently up 3 points. S&P's gained 43, while the NASDAQ is up by 240. The U.S. 10-year yield at 3.82%. Gold is down 15. Oil is sinking. And Bitcoin is trading higher by 0.4%. Of the main 11 S&P sectors, leaders were tech and real estate. Energy and utilities were under pressure. And leaders to the upside in the Dow, Microsoft and Goldman Sachs, while Intel fell 5% and led to the downside. After earnings, NVIDIA did soar as much as 29%. And in deal news, Glencore's Viterra is said to be in merger talks with Bunge. In the activist space, Illumina shareholders elected one icon nominee to the board. And in other news, JP Morgan tells 1,000 First Republic staffers they will lose their jobs. Wrapping things up, some of the names reporting after the bell tonight include Costco, Autodesk, Ulta Beauty, and Workday. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie?
Okay, we thank you very much, Bill. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type Squawk, SQUA, on your Bloomberg terminal. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no. Who's gonna drive you home?
Honey, please, I'll do the driving.
Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
It's
the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, we've got, about 18 minutes left in today's trading session. What did you do when I wasn't here? Do you do this?
Yeah, I hung out with Paul Sweeney, but neither of us knows how to run the show, so it was a little bit of a calamity.
I bet it was kind of
We're glad you're back.
I'm glad to be back. All right, so let's get to it. It is time for our drive to the close, and our guest on this, what is it, Thursday? Yeah, Lauren Sanfilippo, Director and Senior Investment Strategy Analyst for the Chief Investment Office at Bank of America. She is joining us on the phone in New York City. Lauren, good to have you here. There's a lot of stuff going on. First of all, how do you guys think about the craze in AI right now, and how investable is it?
Yeah, I think it's been pretty interesting to see this play out just in terms of some of our thematic ideas, these longer term things that are playing out now in the markets. And sort of that mega cap surge, it's been well discussed on your program, but we're still sort of in this trading pattern of the top of the market, those top 5 stocks that are accounting for the majority of that S&P gain year to date. And obviously those valuations have obviously been running up along the way. But those mega cap names, and it's following this AI sort of euphoric surge in the market, it's sort of what's moving the index. And I don't think you need to read too much into this narrowness of the market, but we'll see how that AI story plays out as it pertains to productivity.
So is it not a play for you right now?
We do think it's also an up in quality story that's really important to us year to date. So we think those companies that are following the AI craze, they're still exhibiting those tech balance sheets are pretty healthy, and they've proved their earnings power through the Q1 earnings reports.
You say we shouldn't pay too much attention to the narrowness, to the lack of breadth. Why is that?
Yeah, so I think, in most cases it could indicate that, we'd prefer to see a broader rally, of course. That would be the preference. But I think, some of these companies will grow into the valuations as it can be attributed to the AI craze and other reasons why the index is moving.
Now, Lauren, that sounds very similar to the kind of things that Carol and I were hearing in 1999. And that's the last time we had such narrowness in this market. I mean, there's no breadth. If you look at the equal weighted S&P, we're down year to date. So it's got to be concerning at some levels.
Or does it just mean there's more opportunity for the rest of the market to come on in?
Yeah, I think this is part of sort of that earnings reset that's still in front of us. And then that will include probably coming out the other side will include a broader rally, broader participation. But really until then, yeah, the other names are in participation purgatory, right?
So is this part of the reason that you, Savita at Bank America, your strategists have raised your target? You're now looking at 4,300 for the year end, and you were only looking at 4,000 previously.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is attributable to the largely better than fear first quarter earnings. I think the path forward, maybe next quarter, it brings a trough in earnings, the upcoming second quarter reporting season. I think we're in the thick of that earnings recession, though, that I was talking about, and then we see those efficiencies for corporate America sort of reset.
Wait, are we in an earnings recession, you're saying? Or because I know we've talked with our Gina Martin-Adams a lot about it, and she said it's already happened.
Yeah, that's correct. So we did hit the second quarter of that negative earnings report, and Savita's penciling in now the second quarter also negative, the third quarter also negative. So we're sort of in the thick of it. That's right.
So what kind of recovery do you expect in terms of earnings, and what's going to drive that? Is it all going to come from AI?
No, so it's not going to all come from AI. I do think that sort of tech took it on the chin last year, right? So they've already been working on sort of making those efficiency, cost cutting. Tech's sort of already been in this. I think the rest of the market sort of gets pulled along here.
So upbeat, pessimistic, optimistic? What are you in terms of the financial markets right now?
Yeah, I think I'm more positive after seeing first quarter play out in terms of earnings. But, I think if you then segment the actual economy, right, we've seen that leading economic indicator. It's now confirmed that, it's dropped for the 13th consecutive month. So the worst of the slowdown, if it materializes into a recession, it's actually in front of us. So our economists are calling for that recession beginning in Q3 of this year. So I think, somewhere in the throes here, we've gotten more positive, yes, but that growth slowdown still in front of us, and that earnings recession is still, the majority of it's still in front of us as well.
So what do you expect the Fed to do, and how important is, Jay Powell's decision on rates going forward?
Yeah, I mean, is it a pause? Is it a skip? It's almost like a weird game of Uno. And there's a lot of terms being thrown out there and what they decide to do at the June meeting. I think by the time the Fed puts all the pieces together, staying data dependent, our view is the June meeting will bring a pause. Maybe we already saw the last hike to the Fed's interest rate hiking cycle. It was in May. And market expectations have sort of been bouncing around here. At one point, cuts were expected for June, and those cuts are now being pushed out to later in the year. And we're more of the mindset that cuts aren't a story until next year. It would be more typical anyway to see that sort of pause, that length of pause. I think the average is around 10 months between the last rate hike and the first cut of the cycle. So as is typical, we expect to sort of hold that pause for some time.
Hey, Lauren, just last question. I mean, when you're getting together with your team and just talking about the markets and what's going on, what is the thing you guys spend the most time talking about? Is it valuations? Is it Fed policy? Is it action now or lack thereof out of D.C.? What is it?
Yeah, I think it's actually a mixture of all those things right now. But it's also about investment areas, right? How we came into the year hedging for the recession, and now we have to think about the pivot forward, right? So like, where are there investable sleeves in the market? And we've been defensively positioned, but with so much money on the sidelines, I'd caution the market is up 7-8% for the year, and we're just focusing on staying invested and staying diversified.
Where's all the money on the sidelines? Money market funds?
Yeah, that's a lot of money, right? A lot of money committed to money market funds this year. We're just looking for opportunities to put money to work.
That's interesting. So once everybody comes back in. Lauren, thanks so much. Lauren Sanfilippo, Director and Senior Investment Strategy Analyst for the Chief Investment Office over at Bank of America, on the phone in New York City. I mean, I don't know. Is that I guess we could at some point talk about that, right? All the money that's just sitting waiting to be put to work, right?
Carol, you and I have been talking about that for 23 years.
Right. And look what we've gone
There's
through.
a lot of money on the sidelines.
It's always on the sidelines, isn't it?
Yes.
All right, everybody, we got just about 11 minutes left in the trading session. Matt and I are going to come back, and then we're going to check in with our TV team and count you down to the close on this Thursday. This is Bloomberg.
Your company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Cathie Wood's flagship exchange-traded fund closed out its NVIDIA stake in early January. Then came the AI frenzy that sent the stock and its big tech peers on a tear. Now the chipmaker has added around $560 billion in market capitalization since Wood dumped her shares, with the last $200 billion of that surge coming overnight after the company handily beat earnings. NVIDIA right now pushing higher by 24.4%. As for ARK, that is the ARK Innovation ETF, it is down today, dropping by just about 2.6%. Bottom line here, better than expected numbers out of NVIDIA. Ian King covers semiconductors for Bloomberg News.
Yeah, I mean, they embarrassed Wall Street. The prediction of 11 billion, which would be their biggest quarter ever for the current period, 53% higher than where the average expectation was. And the numbers on the quarter were similarly a lot stronger. Even the paltry, long forgotten, nobody cares about PC business is looking better for them as well.
And again, NVIDIA up by 24% among some of the other chip names. Intel today down by 5.3%. Advanced Micro Devices up now by 10.9%. J.P. Morgan Chase is notifying about 1,000 First Republic Bank employees that they are not being given jobs, even temporarily, following its takeover of the failed lender. Today, J.P. Morgan Chase shares are up by about 0.2%. Those are some of the top company stories we're following this hour. I'm Charlie Pellet. This is Bloomberg.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenivek on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, you are listening and watching Bloomberg Business Week. I'm Carol Messer along with Matt Miller. You know, Tim is on leave. In just a few minutes, we're going to head over to our TV colleagues and talk about the markets and the market close. What do you want to talk about?
What do I want to talk about?
Yeah.
The volley, to be honest,
ball is in your court.
I really think even though it happened yesterday, like almost 24 hours ago, I still can't get over the NVIDIA earnings report and the massive surge in market cap. I mean,
wild,
it was a
right?
$750 million company that's now worth billion dollar company that's now worth $960 billion.
Right.
So boom, they added $200 billion on one earnings report. And someone was telling us how far off the analysts have been.
I actually took the quote because I wanted to make sure I had it right.
Yeah.
And because I think you had it right. Ian King, who follows the semiconductor space for us, has for a long time. He said, he shared with me, Wall Street embarrassed by their forecast. It was 53%. NVIDIA's forecast was 53% above what the average estimate said they do in revenue this quarter. That's
Exactly.
a huge miss.
Well, it makes you wonder, something I've been wondering for 2 decades now. These sell-side analysts, don't they ever talk to, the executives at these companies?
how's it going?
Get guidance, and then remember that the whole point of this whole system that we have is to underpromise and overdeliver. They always want to beat. The executives do. So the analysts should raise their estimates to a level where they think they're going to be, instead of just letting them beat like crazy all the time.
Which makes you wonder, like, are they just not doing the research, or what happened, or what was it, or did all of a sudden?
Is it a scam?
Wow.
I mean, yes, obviously,
it's a game.
it is a scam.
Like we talk about this all the time in terms of forecasts, right? I mean, we're so managed.
Look, the average over, I think, the last 20 years for quarterly earnings, 76% of companies in the S&P beat analyst estimates.
Consistently.
But these analysts went to Harvard. These analysts have done programs at Goldman Sachs. They should know. They should be the smartest people in the whole world. And the CEOs who went to, Iowa are beating them every time.
Hey, coming up on Bloomberg, Matt Miller tells us how he really feels about analyst forecasts. No, listen, Matt, I feel like it's a game. I even think about it when we talk about some of the strategists on the S&P, right? How often are they wrong? It's one thing if somebody called it right. So, right?
Yes.
Just saying. All right, we're gonna continue this. Right now, though, it's over to Matt, not Matt. Matt's with me. Romain's with Katie. We're gonna count you down to the close. Beyond the Bell starts right now.
Else.
All right, full market coverage coming up here as we count you down to these closing bells. Stick with us. We're about to take you to the bell and beyond.
Beyond the Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romain Bostic alongside Katie Greifeld. We're counting you down to the closing bell, here to help take us beyond the bell. It's a global simulcast with Carol Masser and Matt Miller. Welcome to our audiences across all of our Bloomberg platforms, television, radio, originals, and our partnership with YouTube. Carol Masser, stocks pretty much right around where they were, I think, the last time we talked about an hour ago here. An AI-driven rally, but if you're not tied to AI or the chip space, there isn't a whole lot else moving higher.
No, I'm looking at the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index. It's up about 7% here. So that news out of NVIDIA has just lifted the whole space. But you know what I really want to know, Romain? You know what Matt and I really want to know?
No.
When you say beyond the bell, or the bell and beyond, what is beyond the bell?
Well, first of all, Carol, if I told you that, then, I don't know. Who knows what I have to do here. It's kind of confidential, but I can tell you it's wonderful.
Okay.
You're missing out.
So maybe someday you'll share.
I thought it just was the minutes after 4 o'clock.
And the interesting thing is,
I'm with you, Katie.
when Bed Bath & Beyond
It's just
goes
like
bankrupt,
5 o'clock
did you
is
know
beyond
that
the bell.
Beyond actually does not?
I know, see?
I did not know that.
All right.
You know what? I'm thinking about Katie Greifeld today.
Yeah.
So it's good that she's here because we cover ETFs together.
Yeah.
And we talk to a lot of times people who have equal weighted ETFs, which right now equal weighting is interesting with no breadth in this market, as Romaine was talking about the last couple of days. We see the S&P 500 actually up 8% year to date, but if you look at the equal weighted S&P, it's down 1% year to date. So that just goes to show you how much these tech companies like NVIDIA have driven up the broader index.
All right, as we get the closing bell here in New York, interesting day here, and a day, of course, that's a bit bifurcated here because of sort of the lopsided nature of what's been driving this market. Nevertheless, though, it is an up day here for most of the major indices. The S&P 500 is going to finish the day higher by about 36 points or 0.9%. The NASDAQ higher by more than 200 points or 1.7% there. On a day, we should point out here, where we are seeing members of our military forces helping to ring in the bells over at the NYSC as Fleet Week here in New York City. A tradition, of course, that comes right around Memorial Day every year here. And, of course, always a reminder here of some of the men and women who help to keep this country safe and sound. A Dow Jones Industrial Average down about 0.1% on the day, and the Russell 2000, that's your laggard, down 0.7%.
Isn't this the first Fleet Week since the pandemic? Is it right? Is that right?
I'm not sure that's right. But,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. We'll have to check on that. TBD.
Yeah.
In the meantime, let's take a look at the S&P 500. Romaine giving us the closing numbers. And if you take a look at the split in terms of those names gaining and those names losing some ground, 204 to the upside in the S&P 500, Katie, 295 to the downside, 4 unchanged.
All right, if you want to look at the gainers, the losers, and the gainers, you can take a look at the GRR function. I like to put SPX L1 index in there, but, well, someone else likes to put SPX index L2. As you can see, because now there are 24 groups. In any case, we have semiconductor makers and semiconductor equipment leading the way there. And at the bottom, you see telecoms and energy. But it's really all about tech stocks, NVIDIA, and the semiconductors, isn't it?
Before we get to the individual movers today, I do want to point out we are getting some earnings. Autodesk, the big software company, reporting earnings right now in line pretty much across the board here. 155, that's your EPS number, right on the nose of what the Street was looking for. Net revenue, $1.27 billion, right on the nose of what the Street was looking for. Your guidance for the year, it's standing by its previous guidance. Full year revenue, $5.36 billion to $5.46 billion. That was the guidance that it had before here. Overall here, in line with market expectations.
All right, still some earnings coming out, a few more to go, and we'll break them down as they cross, certainly on this Thursday. But in the meantime, let's get to some of the individual gainers. Man, we can't talk about it enough today. NVIDIA, top in the S&P 500, top in the NASDAQ 100. And if we pull up the boards with a gain of about 24% here to a record close, I believe. Yep, no doubt about it. So it's the world's most valuable chip maker. You know the news. You broke it last night. Our team here, that forecast, just hitting it out of the park here and really giving a lift to the overall semiconductor space. Synopsys is another one that was among the top in the S&P 500 and NASDAQ 100. It's a supplier of software used to design semiconductors. So it's right in the middle of all of this AI euphoria that's going on, heavy volume, and you had Synopsys up about 10%. And then, do you want to do that headline, Romaine, and then I'll come back?
Yeah, just real quickly, a look, of course, at the daily Treasury cash balance, a drop in the most recent day here. This is through the end of the day, Wednesday, $49.5 billion. That's effectively what the Treasury has on hand in order to pay our bills. That number on Tuesday was around $76.5 billion. These numbers do oscillate, of course, because of tax receipts that the Treasury gets, but of course at $49 billion, that's well below where it should be, and of course raises a lot of questions here about that so-called X date and exactly when it is.
Yeah, swings around, but certainly a low mark there on that. Hey, just one more gainer for you, everybody, because we are waiting for Ulta Beauty to come out. Well, Elf Beauty came out, and it was quite a rally. That name up about 21% here, reporting fourth quarter results, broadly topped analyst expectations. They also issued stronger than anticipated annual projections for sales and profits. So
Did you
really,
say Elf?
Elf Beauty.
Elf Beauty. Everyone wants to look like an elf. Let's talk about the decliners, though, Matt. I'm really excited to talk to you about Dollar Tree, down about, what, 12% today. It slashed its profit outlook. This is interesting. So it's a shift in demand to lower margin food, legal costs from a rat infestation at a warehouse, and an increase in shrink. That, of course, is an industry term that includes
rat infestation.
losses from theft. Yeah, I hate to see it. A lot of legal costs there. Snowflake also having a terrible day, down 16.5%. Disappointing sales forecast that suggests that many companies are trimming their spend on cloud software. That's not good news for Snowflake. And just really quickly, of course, American Eagle down almost 12% as well. First quarter sales and gross margin actually were better than expected, but it's always about the guidance, and analysts here are saying that the guidance for the second quarter and the full year were softer, of course, driven by weaker quarter-to-date trends in May.
Just real quickly here, more earnings crossing the wire. This on Workday, the shares higher by about 8% here in after-hours trading here. It does look like they beat on adjusted EPS, $1.31. Street will, on average, was looking for about $1.13, and revenue coming in at $1.68 billion, slightly above Street estimates. The big headline, though, here is Barbara Larson, the CFO over at Workday, stepping aside to spend, according to the press release, more time with her family. She had risen to that role just back in 2022. So she was only on the job as a CFO for a little more than a year. A new CFO has already been named here, and just want to double check. Zane Rowe being elevated to the CFO position.
All right. Go ahead. You want to do yields?
Yeah, we just real quickly, we should point out, I mean, I mentioned this earlier, 4.5 right now on a 2-year yield. That's 16 basis points than where we were 24 hours ago. Actually, 16 basis points more than where we were maybe just about 4 or 5 hours ago here. So a lot of activity right now, Carol, in the yield space.
All right, got it. That is the yield space. Thank you. And let's get to Ulta Beauty. As I mentioned, Elfa was out earlier. Ulta Beauty crossing in the after hours, and the stock's down about 11% here. Company says fiscal year net sales 11 to 11.1 billion, had seen 10.95 to 11.05 billion, so that looks pretty much in line. First quarter comp sales, though, that was a beat, 9.3%, compared to the estimate of 8.85%. First quarter net sales, pretty much in line, 2.6 billion. The estimate was 2.62. And also talking about operating margin of 14.5% to 14.8, had seen 14.7 to 15%, so a little bit of a range, but you're seeing that stock down about 9%, Katie, here in the aftermarket.
Let's also talk about RH, because we are getting numbers from that company as well. First quarter net revenue came in at about $739 million. The estimate had been for $726.8 million, so a little bit softer there. The first quarter adjusted EPS, $2.21. The estimate had been for $2.11, so a little bit of a beat there. You can see shares lower by about 1% right now. And here's the important part. RH sees fiscal year revenue at about $3 billion to $3.1 billion. It had seen that at about $2.9 billion to $3.1 billion, so narrowing that range a little bit there.
Take a look at Marvell. You know, being that chips are the it thing right now, Marvell is having a pretty darn good time in the aftermarket. The company came out with second quarter adjusted gross margin about 60 to 61%. That's in line with the estimate. The EPS was a loss of 16 cents. And it looks like that's below a bigger loss than had been expected. The net revenue that they see, the forecast, which I guess is the key, right? 1.3 billion, plus or minus 5%. Anyway, the shares are up 13% in the aftermarket.
Yeah, so quite a big bump. It feels like everything we touch in the chip space or anything connected, we certainly see
except for Intel.
Move to the upside.
Except for little bitty Intel.
It's not easy being Intel right now.
The gains in NVIDIA today were twice Intel's entire market cap.
Yeah, that's perspective for you. All right. Well, time will tell who ultimately wins, right? Because we know Intel's certainly trying to right the ship there. All right, guys, that is a wrap on this Thursday. Our cross-platform coverage, a little bit of earnings for you as well. Our cross-platform on radio, TV, YouTube, and, of course, Bloomberg Originals. The team will see you again, same time, same place, tomorrow.
Stick with us. Coverage continues here on Bloomberg Television. Look at some of the earnings crossing the wire, including Costco, Gap, up ahead.
I'm just getting into the song here. Are you getting into the song a little bit?
Here to see the Dead Company on tour. Carol, do you have tickets?
I don't have tickets.
You want me to get you one?
The
shows are Wednesday and Thursday night at the end of July. So
we're here in the city?
Yeah.
All right, I'll get back to you on that.
Field.
I'll get back to you. We want to talk a little bit about Ron DeSantis, right? Officially launching his long-awaited 2024 presidential campaign yesterday. He did it in a Twitter Spaces event with its owner, Elon Musk. And Matt, it went off without a hitch.
No.
Hence.
So many people were interested. It was so
I know.
popular. There was such an amazing amount of demand
Talk about
that they crashed the system. That's what they
All
say,
right.
right?
Bloomberg's Quick Take correspondent and my sometime co-host here, Madison Mills, is here with us in studio. It didn't go so well.
It didn't go so well, but that was a great presentation of what they hope would have happened, Matt. So thank you for that. But no, I mean, the platform crashed because so many people were flooding into the Twitter Spaces room, is what it's called.
Is that a good thing that everybody was excited to be there and were willing to go there?
It also wasn't really that many people,
Right.
Maddie.
That's where I was going to go. I mean, allegedly it was 600,000. Some news networks that are not ours openly talked about how their overnight numbers are much higher than that, and this was 6 p.m. prime time, right? So it's arguably not that strong of an audience.
David Sachs said, look, if you do this on a network, you get, what, 2 or 3 million viewers?
Yeah.
And he said Twitter's going to have a multiple of that.
You had David Sachs on TV. Who is he?
He is part of the PayPal mafia. He's, a rich investor who was involved in a lot of things, including Yammer, which he sold for $1.2 billion. And he's the one who, he hosted this? I don't know how Twitter Spaces work because I've obviously never been on a Twitter Spaces.
We got to get you on there.
Well,
We should be doing this, but yes.
You know this world. Tell us how it works.
So originally, it was going to be Elon Musk hosting the room. His argument is that he has such a strong following on the platform that is what caused that huge demand, which crashed Twitter in the end. So then David Sachs comes in to save the day because he has less followers, so potentially driving less people to the room is the argument there. But also,
how about you just check that your infrastructure can handle it?
Well, this is right after a lot of cost cutting. The entire
They
product
fired everybody
team.
who works there, so who's going to do the checking?
And no testing in advance. I mean, I'm sorry to do the comparison, but this is so similar to the Netflix Love is Blind finale. No stress test.
Also something I didn't
You know
watch.
what I mean?
No.
We got to get you in there.
No, but if you're going to play it up, right, you're going to show, look at what our platform can do. This was kind of a big kind of
Well, who's the
CTO
CTO at Twitter? Who's the
Well, we've
chief
got
technology officer?
We do know that the new CEO was in the room, Linda, ex-NBC
The CEO.
executive. Yes, so she was in the Twitter Space room, wasn't active in the conversation, but
In
she
both
was
rooms?
in there, both rooms.
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
throughout. So she got to listen to the entire thing. But yeah, I do think that the cost-cutting measures. It's hard to not say that had an impact on the tech.
The other thing is beyond just the structure, the tech part of it.
Yeah.
The substance of it was reportedly pretty slanted. Like all of the people who were able to ask questions were Ron DeSantis supporters. So they were throwing him softballs. Nobody even asked about abortion rights, which I have to think is going to be one of the biggest issues. Am I wrong about that? It's going to be one of the biggest issues of the presidential election.
Absolutely.
Especially if it's DeSantis Biden, right?
Yeah.
Well, so this goes to the use of Twitter as something more than what we've all been using, right? If he's looking for revenue streams or figuring out how to engage with more people in different ways, this was a way to potentially showcase it, right, Maddie? And it just didn't quite necessarily, I don't know. How do we read it?
The financial question in the room is that Ron DeSantis is in a huge fight with Disney, and Disney is one of Twitter's largest advertisers. So what does that look like for Twitter moving forward? Elon has said multiple times that he doesn't care about the ad dollars, but I wonder how long that can last. And to your point earlier,
He definitely doesn't care about dollars, Elon Musk. He spent $44 billion to buy Twitter.
Can you do that forever? Can you do that forever?
I mean, if you have a couple $100 billion, you can do it for a while.
Okay.
You can as long as the rest of your business does okay, right? I mean, at some point, do investors say, and if this is, this is what was part of the concern about him being spread too thin about across too many different properties. And if it starts to hit the rest of the business where there are public investors, there's going to be problems.
And he's said that, and I know David Sachs spoke with you about this earlier, Matt, as well, that they're inviting every candidate to come on the platform and do a Twitter space room and a Q&A coinciding with the live conversation. And he's also publicly supported other candidates as well, not just Ron DeSantis. He's tweeted support of Republican Tim Scott. He's gotten Trump unsuspended from the platform, who, by the way, tweeted Ron 2024 in air quotes with a failed rocket launch after the Twitter space
What if
failed.
Ronald and Donald get together? Donald and Ronald.
But I'm kind of like.
By the way,
Sachs
Sachs has also supported a Democrat, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
No, I keep thinking about this event, that this was an opportunity for them to show, look at, we don't have to, not the traditional networks, not streaming or whatever, to actually use this platform to engage with people.
Yeah.
And move it beyond maybe, from what it is today.
And it got the same critique that the CNN town hall that
Did
hosted
it?
Donald Trump did, which was, why is the audience filled with supporters? Why didn't we get any questions about abortion? Which I was
Agreed.
so happy you asked David Sachs about that. And his point was, well, we also got people saying that we didn't talk about the economy enough. So that's his argument on that. But it was entirely one-sided. There were only questions from DeSantis supporters.
Well, especially for a candidate who purportedly supports freedom, right? But apparently not if you're a woman. So freedom just for a certain group of people in this country?
Well, welcome to America sometimes.
I just looked, by the way, when Felix Baumgartner jumped out of space and it was streamed on YouTube, 8 million people tuned in.
So what are you saying?
But only 490,000 people tuned in to watch Ron DeSantis announce his. So I think DeSantis should have done this maybe on YouTube and possibly jumping from outer space.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Go back to Twitter Spaces.
Yep.
Who controls who goes in the rooms?
So that's a really good question, because I have to imagine that Elon Musk has different permissions than the rest of us out there, I would think. But if I host a room, anyone can jump in there, right? I tweet out the link, anyone is able to join, but I am the host, so I have all the power. I can decide who gets to speak. I can invite co-hosts, so other people also have power over who's in the room and who's talking. But it really comes down to whoever the hosts, the official hosts, are in the room. And in this case, that was Elon Musk and David
So
Sachs.
a lot of people can be there, but not everybody's allowed to speak.
Exactly.
Speak.
How does it actually work for someone who I don't go on Twitter, and I've never been in the Twitter space. So do I just go into my Twitter account and then look at Elon Musk's account, or how does that?
You can do it that way, or it'll likely show up in your feed. Last night, a lot of people were tweeting about how it showed up in everyone's feed, so maybe it got a little bit of inter-platform promotion from Elon. There's been a lot of speculation that Elon Musk's tweets all go viral, so maybe he's feeding them to all of the users. We don't have any confirmation of that, obviously, but that's just kind of the Twitter chatter. So the live stream or the Twitter space sort of pops up in your feed, then you can click into it and join and listen in and ask a question if you want to.
Maybe I'll do it sometime.
No, I actually think it could be very productive, right?
Yeah.
Like, if we think about how we're getting content in a lot of different ways, and Twitter in general, we all in the media tend to like it a lot because it's a great way to get a lot of information from different news sources. Like, if they could figure it out, it could be an interesting way forward, especially
Wasn't there another
for
app
politics.
like this? Wasn't there another Club Room or something?
Oh, yes,
Clubhouse.
yes.
I didn't think you would know it, so I didn't bring it up, and I was about to.
Francine Lacroix
I'm so
invited me to
sorry.
it, and I felt like a part of the elite when it was in beta.
That's
you know?
pretty cool, but then it got uncool very quickly. So don't you don't.
But
need to
Elon
bring it
Musk
up
did a
again.
thing on Clubhouse, right?
But it's over. Like, no one uses Clubhouse
see.
anymore. It's not
Okay,
cool anymore. Yeah.
All right, so net takeaway. We've got 30 seconds. Net takeaway of this from this?
He tried a strategy of, reaching people on social. It was a social play. The glitches were rough, but this can give us a signal that he's going to try to reach people in unique, different ways in order to gain market share from Trump voters, basically.
Stay tuned. There could be more. It's not just about rockets.
I'm excited.
Or holes in the
What
ground.
a fun election cycle this is going to be. It's never been this crazy.
Madison Mills.
That's what they always say.
I know. Maddie, thank you. I'm so glad we were able to cover this. Correspondent for Bloomberg Quick Take, as you know, often a co-host here on Bloomberg Radio. I did want to mention Gap is up 8% in the after hours. Costco is down about 1.5% following its results. We're going to get into that in just a moment, right here on Bloomberg.
events, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
421 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long at Bloomberg. Lots of earnings after the close of trading, and we've got you covered. Marvell Technology expecting AI revenue in fiscal 2024 to at least double from a year ago, as it names it as its key growth driver. After hours, shares are rallying 13.1%. Autodesk has boosted its adjusted EPS for the full year. After hours, that stock now trading lower by just about 0.3%, have been up after hours by as much as 0.3%. Workday has narrowed its subscription revenue forecast for the full year. Also reporting after the close of trading today, we heard from Gap. It reported better than expected adjusted EPS and margin improvement in the first quarter. After hours, Gap surging now by 14.1%. Turned out to be a mixed day on Wall Street. We had the Dow Jones Industrial Average down 35 points, a drop of 0.1%. The S&P rose as a rally in companies linked to the frenzy in artificial intelligence outweighed broader market concerns, including the potential debt default. S&P up 36, up by 0.9%. NASDAQ rallied 214 points, up 1.7%. NVIDIA was up today by 23.4%. 10-year yield 3.81%, but the 2-year 4.52%. Spot gold down $16 the ounce, down 0.8%. And today we had West Texas Intermediate crude down 3.3%, 71.80 at a barrel. Again, the 2-year 4.52%, the 10-year 3.81%. Gold, to be clear, down 0.8%, 19.40 the ounce. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Continuing to watch shares of Costco down about 2.7% here in the after hours, and also watching Gap as well coming out with its earnings. Gap is up about 15% as we speak.
They made money.
I know. They have
Analysts thought they would lose 16 cents a share, but they made 1 penny.
They have been. It's a
good. They did 17 cents better.
That's called a profit. All right, let's get to it because we want to talk a little bit about the cannabis industry. I don't know, Matt, if you saw, there was a Bloomberg News story earlier this month, and it talked about cannabis basically facing financial and regulatory malaise in the U.S., but it isn't affecting the perceptions of consumers who increasingly approve of it.
I know, and the sales numbers are very strong. State by state, of course, is where we see that, but it's billions and billions of dollars in revenue, and that's runs the gamut from medical use, prescribed medical use, to recreational, like at a dead show.
All right. In the meantime, our next guest is in it. Also has a personal story around it. We welcome Morgan Paxia, co-founder and managing partner of Poseidon Investment Management, keeper of the advisor shares Poseidon, like
the king.
I know it's not coming out right. Poseidon ETFs on Zoom in New York City. Sorry, it's been a rough week. Morgan, good to have you here with Matt and myself. First of all, tell us about how you got into all of this, because it is a personal story.
It is. Like so many of us that have gotten into the cannabis industry, usually starts for a lot of us with a family event. For us, we lost our parents to cancer at a very young age. I was 12 when my dad passed, and 18 when my mom, and I started the business with my sister Emily just about 10 years ago now. But they were both believers in ending the war on drugs. They thought it was, unjust. But really what was a clear moment for us was when our dad was in hospice care. A nurse actually offered him some cannabis, just trying to help him find some peace in the final days, or just some comfort, being on all those opioids. Wouldn't do it because the stigma, because it was illegal, didn't want to have any kind of tarnished kind of sentiment back with family or anybody around us. And obviously we thought that was very wrong. I was young, but as we say, it planted the seed for our future. And so we've been.
So you, Morgan, and your sister Emily, started this ETF? How did you get into it to begin with?
Our first fund we launched in January of 2014 it's actually a hedge fund. It still runs today, but we invested in much like a hybrid strategy where we were doing private early stage investments, because everything was private and early back then, but it had the ability to also invest in companies that were public or would become public companies. So it really gave us the full gamut. We launched our ETF in November of 2021, thinking that a lot of the bear market cycle had corrected. We were wrong, we were early with that, but also waiting patiently for the market to get a little bit more mature before we had a product such as an ETF. But we thought the ETF was a great addition to the Poseidon investment universe, where we could have a product that anyone could buy. As a hedge fund and our two subsequent venture capital funds, those are only eligible for accredited investors or institutional like investors, versus an ETF anyone can buy.
So I look at the price, right? And as you pointed out, you're early. So you came out at $10 and it's now down at $1.15. And if I look at the holdings, you have Green Thumb, Curaleaf, Trulieve, Cresco. I mean, basically the usual suspects for the most part, right? Mm-hmm. And their stock charts look the same as your ETF. That's right. What can you do differently than another fund or ETF that's investing in marijuana in order to get a little bit of alpha?
Yep, we're unconstrained, so we can invest globally. We can be, in Canada or Europe. Really, there's not too much in Europe yet, but it is an unconstrained strategy from whether or not we're investing in U.S. operators or technology companies. So that's one unique feature. We're not tied to any benchmark. It's really just at our discretion. And then we also have a dynamic leverage capability. So we can be anywhere from 80%, so we can be unlevered, or we can be up to 150% leverage. And we can dial that up and down. And as a good example, for the most part of this year, we were at 0.95 times. But then as some of this safe banking initiative started to come back with regular order in the Senate, there's some other things in the works. We have slowly taken leverage up to 110%. So we're just modestly leveraged today, but believing that there are some potential progress. So we saw regulatory change, but also the fundamentals of the industry have been improving over subsequent quarters. So we like that the fundamental support is there, and any kind of regulatory progress would generate some nice upside return, but predominantly focused on good companies. We want to see companies that are have gross margins, have nice EBITDA margins, have either the ability of generating free cash flow or are already generating free cash flow. And so that's what our portfolio looks like today. So really trying to focus on quality.
Right. Morgan, I feel like we've seen a lot of cycles already when it comes to the cannabis sector, to be fair. And is it just a case of the industry really can't get going until the Safe Banking Act is passed? I mean, they need to be part of the financial system. Right. It's been the one thing that's really been holding it back.
And explain to us, if you could, it's the Secure and Fair Enforcement Banking Act. What is that going to allow you to do?
Well, the way we look at it is, it's first and foremost, it's helping small business in cannabis. It's providing safety to communities. We are largely a cash-based industry. So if you're a retailer, you have a lot of cash in your store. That's trouble, right? And we've seen a significant increase in crime around that because there are people being advantageous. So that
because you can't put it in banks, right?
You sort of can, but it's very limited. So Safe will help recognize that we are on the same playing field as every other industry, with the ability to deposit, wire, working lines of capital. So that will help. And also, if we do get capital markets included, which is being discussed, and the minority groups are actually supporting this, understanding that if you're going to have federal reform around banking, it should be all of banking. And we think that's actually a really smart way to think about it. We support that as well. We know the exchanges believe that too. And to your point, that we think that'll help move money again in this space. It's largely slowed down considerably. Custody is very hard. So banking reform is needed. And that's how DC functions. The industry's moved far ahead, and now we're looking to DC to catch up with us on this first step.
I would be shocked. First step. I mean, what is your expectation for the Safe Banking Act?
They're a little busy right now.
I mean,
anyway,
the problem is it doesn't function, right? So what's your expectation, Morgan, for Congress to actually move on this legislation?
It's actually looking like the Senate could get this done, as long as Safe stays in a pretty targeted way from a banking reform perspective. It sounds like we have Democrat and Republican support, and that's why it's going through this regular order process. And we think we could potentially see a vote as early as July. Then we have to move on to the House, which it's passed 7 times in the past. but we'll have to go through that process again. So that is helpful. But in the interim, we are seeing structures like one of the companies, TerraSend, is potentially listing on the Toronto Stock Exchange. Now we might be seeing a structure that might actually be blessed by the NASDAQ, waiting on SEC. So if we're able to get access to the exchanges even without or while we are waiting for safe banking, that's progress. And our industry is finally done being stuck, from a capital perspective, and very happy to see that action is moving again. And so capital will start to flow as a result of that.
All right, Morgan, thanks very much for joining us. Morgan Paxia there from Poseidon Asset Management. The ETF is the Advisor Shares Poseidon Dynamic Cannabis ETF, and the ticker is PSDN.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like we've been back and forth here, and until you basically bring these companies into the financial system, right, cross-border, across states, it really has been holding them back. We've seen this before, and so you really have to have lawmakers in D.C. finally act on it, do something.
I mean, from national down to a local level, the whole thing has been an absolute mess.
Yeah.
I mean, just look around New York. I don't know how New Jersey is, but there are 2 legal weed shops in Manhattan and about 500 bodegas where you can go ahead and buy the same stuff, or better. So it doesn't make any sense.
No, it needs to be worked out already. All right, folks, you are listening and watching Bloomberg Business Week. Let's head off to D.C. and our 99.1 Newsroom. That's where we find Nancy Lyons with a check on world and national news. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol. Well, it's a sentence of 18 years for the leader of the Oath Keepers for his role in the Capitol riot in 2021.
58-year-old Stuart Rhodes has been ordered to serve 18 years in prison after a federal judge ruled his actions amounted to terrorism. Rhodes is one of 10 defendants convicted of seditious conspiracy, and it is the longest sentence handed down so far in the prosecution of more than 1,000 people over the storming of the Capitol. Rhodes told the judge he considers himself a political prisoner and that he never even set foot inside the Capitol that day. In Washington, Ann Cates, Bloomberg Radio.
Another Oath Keeper convicted of seditious conspiracy with Rhodes, Kelly Meggs, was also sentenced today. He received 12 years. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy says issues remain in negotiations with the Biden administration on raising the federal debt limit. The clock is ticking down to the point when the Treasury does run out of cash. Political analyst Larry Sabato says Republicans are likely hoping the blame for any possible economic consequences may fall more on the White House.
They know that they may take a hit, but they only have to worry about their district, whereas the president is going to take the biggest hit by far.
Sabato says the American public believes the president is ultimately the one in charge. Well, it certainly wasn't the presidential campaign launch he likely expected, but last night Ron DeSantis announced he is running for president. Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern says the live event on Twitter was plagued by technical glitches and audio problems.
It was supposed to start at 6 p.m., all these technical glitches. He didn't actually say he'd be running for president until 6:26 p.m. So obviously some frustration, I imagine, with those that were trying to listen in. They're spinning it as he, quote unquote, broke the internet.
Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern says the DeSantis campaign brought in about $1 million after the announcement. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
updates, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 4:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long at Bloomberg. We begin with earnings news, lots of it after the bell, and Marvell Technology expects AI revenue in fiscal 2024 to at least double from a year ago. After hours, we've got the stock now up by 13.7%. Gap reporting better than expected adjusted EPS and margin improvement in the first quarter. Also looking at Gap shares up now by 11.6%. Also after the bell, we heard from Costco. Costco reported EPS for the third quarter that missed the average analyst estimate. It was a mixed day on Wall Street. We had the S&P higher by 36 points today, up by about 0.9%. A rally in companies linked to the frenzy in AI outweighed broader market concerns, including a debt default. Also on the minds of investors, the Federal Reserve. Lauren Sanfilippo is senior investment strategist at U.S. Trust Bank of America Private Wealth.
At one point, cuts were expected for June, and those cuts are now being pushed out to later in the year. And we're more of the mindset that cuts aren't a story until next year. It would be more typical anyway to see that sort of pause, that length of pause. I think the average is around 10 months between the last rate hike and the first cut of the cycle. So as is typical, we expect to sort of hold that pause for some time.
The S&P today up 36, a gain of 0.9%. The Dow down 35, drop there of 0.1%. NASDAQ up 214 points today, up 1.7%. 10-year yield 3.81% with the 2-year 4.53%. Gold down $17 the ounce to $19.40, down 0.9%. And West Texas Intermediate crude down 3.4%, $71.82 a barrel. J.P. Morgan Chase shares today little changed, up by about 0.2%. It has notified about 1,000 First Republic Bank employees that they are not being given jobs, even temporarily, following its takeover of the failed lender. Recapping, 10-year 3.82%, the 2-year 4.53%, S&P up 36, up 0.9%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie Pellet, thank you so much. A lot going on this Thursday. Bloomberg News reporting earlier this year how the fitness sector has roared back after being devastated by the pandemic. Cost pressures, though, and a possible recession could possibly pose a threat. So we thought we'd take a look, Matt, at the industry. And we've got someone who's actually spent more than 20 years managing, owning, and franchising health clubs. Chuck Runyon is co-founder and CEO at Anytime Fitness, a franchisor of gyms, joining us on Zoom from Woodbury, Minnesota. Chuck, also the CEO and co-founder of Self-Esteem Brands, which is the owner of Anytime Fitness and also the Bar Method and more. So he's certainly well-versed in this space. Hey, Chuck, nice to have you here with Matt and myself. Talk to us a little bit more about Anytime Fitness, how it all works, and the type of growth you've seen, particularly post-pandemic.
Yes, Carol, Matt, thank you for having me from this beautiful day in Minnesota. Excited to be here. My partner and I started Anytime Fitness just over 20 years ago. We started in Minnesota, but today we serve over 5,500 communities in 40 countries around the world. And our goal has always been to make fitness more affordable, more accessible, and more effective. And we utilize technology to do that so members could work out on their schedule, not the gym schedule. That technology is still in place today, and when you buy a membership at your local club, say in Minnesota, you get to use every club in the network. So we are still infused with technology, and now recently we've just launched our coaching suite, which is providing people with education motivation anytime, anywhere. So whether they're in one of our gyms or studios or wherever in the world they live, we can now reach them, right? Help them be healthier, help them eat better, coach them to a better lifestyle. And so we're very excited, and tremendous growth ahead. We are on a pathway to have 10,000 units by 2030.
So do you have, a lot of people, myself included, have joined gyms and then they'll go a few times and then never go again. And every, couple of years I'll join another one and do it again, do it all over again. But I wish I could stick with it. How do you motivate someone like that?
It's a great question, and something that has been going on in our industry since day one. And, it comes down to a handful of things. First of all, personalization. You know, it really helps with understanding our members, where they're at in their life journey and where they want to get to. And once we do that, we can now not only give them the workout necessary, but give them the coaching, give them the motivation, give them the education that matters to them, and serve them up the type of content that they want to see. And so we're just in this for a series of small wins. If we can help our members just achieve some small wins, some progress along the way, right? When members see progress and experience it, they stick with their membership longer and they reach their fitness goals. When, like you said before, if they don't get that extra help, if they don't feel that level of personalization, they start to drift away, they leave the industry, maybe to come back a few years later. So everything we do is about how do we help our members achieve progress, right? Our members' health is at the center of everything we build here.
You guys, though, believe that basically the government, right, should be, mandating fitness? Give us
Yeah, let's get to that. That would be good.
Let's get a little bit into how you're thinking about this.
Yeah, well, let's zoom out again from our industry. And, you know, right now, globally, we spend $1 trillion a year on healthcare. And 70% of that spend is preventable based on something we call lifestyle medicine. Lifestyle medicine is proper eating, regular exercise, and better sleep and recovery. And so who better to deliver that than gyms or studios located in communities around the country? And so we were so disappointed that during COVID, health experts and policymakers around the world forced studios and gyms to shut down, which is the exact opposite message we should have, especially as we saw that COVID attacked people with underlying health conditions. They had it the worst. And so now,
to be fair, we didn't quite know how COVID was transmitted or how infectious it was, right? So as we found our way, it just made sense to shut it down initially.
I would argue there that there is empirical evidence. There is empirical evidence linking physical activity towards mental health and social well-being. And guess what? Our industry was working with lawmakers to say, we can social distance people inside of our clubs and studios. We can only allow a certain amount of people in at certain times. We were trying to work with them to say, look, fitness is essential. And if it's outside the club or inside a club or studio, the message should be, let's keep people moving, let's keep them healthy during COVID, because now what's accelerated is we have issues of mental health. We have issues where people have been inactive. We have issues of loneliness, right? We have issues of weight gain. And right now, cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes and obesity are the #1 killers globally.
Yeah, we have a big fat problem in this country, Chuck.
It was a wrong message to send.
So hold on. None of us are disputing these numbers, and no doubt about it. But this whole idea of government mandating fitness and wellness. I'm not saying I disagree
It's not that they're
with you.
He's not saying they should mandate fitness and wellness. He's saying they should consider it essential so that they wouldn't close it down in case of a pandemic.
Yeah, and I would not use the word mandating, but think about this. What health expert have you heard really say, get behind, move more, eat better, sleep better? It was all about avoiding a virus, but our real virus is inactivity, right? At the end of the day, we lose hundreds of thousands of people a year to preventable diseases that if they were just live healthier lifestyles, right, we could not only save money, but save lives. And so that should be the message coming out of COVID is how do we get people healthier? And there's no better industry to deliver that than our gyms and studios. And so we're trying to educate policymakers and lawmakers to help with that.
I mean, hopefully we'll never get back to a pandemic where we shut down. I hope the government has learned lessons about these draconian procedures. But one thing we can do, Chuck, is encourage kids to be more active. When I was a child, and Carol, I'm sure as well, we had
presidential fitness.
Exactly. President Eisenhower
had to climb
started
ropes,
this thing, and
do
it was like a
sit-ups,
big
push-ups.
deal when I was a kid. And I think that kids today, for some reason in this snowflake generation, they're allowed to skip gym class because it hurts their feelings. Don't we have to change that?
We do. In fact, if you look at most school budgets around the country, FIAD is being cut. And so there's less and less activity in our kids' lives. And technology is also playing a role to have our kids be more sedentary. So we absolutely, with both adults and children, need to create awareness and incentives and policies to shape the health of this country and to shape the health of global health.
Don't you think technology, though, ultimately with a Apple Watch and different things that are kind of getting us to a point where we're more aware of our fitness or lack thereof in just kind of about 25 seconds, real quick?
I think that the opportunity is there. We absolutely can enable technology for more activity, but it's also like having us be sedentary, right? We're sitting and having too much screen time. So it's both a strength and a
No, but
weakness.
I'm saying, like, if I got a watch, Matt's got a watch, like you count your steps. These things are potentially good. We'll continue this conversation at another date. Chuck
I'm with you,
Runyon.
Chuck.
No, I'm all for wellness and fitness. You know that. Co-founder, CEO of Anytime Fitness, joining us from Minnesota. This is Bloomberg.
Your company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Cathie Wood's flagship exchange-traded fund closed out its NVIDIA stake in early January. Then came the AI frenzy that sent the stock and its big tech peers on a tear. Chipmaker has added around $560 billion in market cap since Wood dumped her shares, with the last $200 billion of that surge coming overnight after the company handily beat earnings. Today, shares of the ARK Innovation Fund down 2.7%. NVIDIA, the big stock story today, it rallied $24.4%, bringing its year-to-date gain to just about 159%. And with more on the earnings at NVIDIA, Mandeep Singh is a senior tech analyst with Bloomberg Intelligence.
What they have done really well is they have gone beyond this narrative of, NVIDIA being just a chip company, and they have actually proved it in the way they have gone about their product launches. So now they have been partnering with the hyperscalers, especially Microsoft, and it's an application that sits on top of Microsoft Cloud, which is how you consume generative AI. And I would say the addressable market for that is north of $1 trillion.
And after the closing bell, we heard from Marvel Technology. It does expect AI revenue in fiscal 2024 to, quote, at least double from a year ago. Watching the shares after hours, Marvel up now by 15.4%. And those are some of the top company stories that we're following for you at this hour. And this is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Massar and Tim Stenivek on Bloomberg Radio.
Matt Miller here with Carol Massar. I'm filling in for Tim Stenivek over the summer. I can't fill his place.
I'm only kidding. You're both incredible. I am a lucky person.
In any case, I want to get down right now to Washington, D.C. We're all on edge, right? Waiting with bated breath for a deal to come through any moment, or at least Sunday night.
Don't have that news.
Nancy Lyons joins us with the news. Nancy?
Thanks, Matt. Stuart Rhodes, the leader of the Oath Keepers, has been sentenced to 18 years for his involvement in the 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. Judge Ahmed Mehta ruled that Rhodes' actions amounted to terrorism and said he poses an ongoing threat to the country and to democracy. Rhodes' attorney, Ed Tarpley, says it was his client's influence that resulted in today's lengthy sentence.
He never went into the Capitol. He never assaulted anyone. He never destroyed any property. We argued all those matters during the trial and post-trial. And clearly, the words of Stuart Rhodes is what the judge returned to time and time again, what he had said over a long period of time.
Tarpley says they had argued for a lighter sentence, citing Rhodes' military service. Another Oath Keeper, Kelly Meggs, received a 12-year sentence today for seditious conspiracy. 1 week and counting till the U.S. runs out of money to pay its bills. President Biden is remaining hopeful.
Speaker McCarthy and I have had several productive conversations, and our staffs continue to meet as we speak, as a matter of fact, and they're making progress.
House lawmakers have gone home for the Memorial Day weekend, but have been told they may be called back with 24 hours notice. If a deal is reached soon, Tuesday looks like it's emerging as the likely day for a House vote. The Senate would then need to act quickly to send it on to Biden's desk before June 1st, which is the date by which Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has said her department could run out of cash. Sticking points appear to be over the scale and the length of spending curbs. The U.S. Supreme Court is putting new limits on the Clean Water Act. Today, it ruled in favor of an Idaho couple that was seeking to build a house on property that federal regulators say is protected wetlands. The ruling could give companies a freer hand to discharge pollutants and could let developers construct more new homes without receiving federal approval. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons. Now back to you, Carol and Matt.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. Nancy Lyons in our D.C. newsroom. Hopefully we're not going to mess up our producer, Ariagami.
Mess him up?
Well, because, you know, he kind of suggests...
He prepares things?
He does prepare things. You know, amazingly, as much as this feels so spontaneous...
To me, it just feels so spontaneous, yeah.
There's a fair amount of planning that goes into this by Paul and Ari, our producers. I'm just going to say... Can we talk about Ford real quickly?
Yes, we can.
Because I think it's interesting coming off of Ron DeSantis and Twitter Spaces yesterday, and now we've got Ford saying that Twitter Spaces, they've got an event today at 5:30 p.m. You would probably maybe go?
I would,
but
yeah, I would like to be honest, it would be my first time. And the problem for me with Twitter is that I one time lost my password and I've never been able to get back into it.
Seriously?
I keep...
So just
it's
reset.
like somehow it doesn't work on my phone. I don't know.